Meeting. 77 AC. South of Neck near River Trident. A moon after the summons, the Lord Paramounts, Lord Corwin Balarion, Master of Ships Manfred Redwyn, and Lord Commander of the Kingsguard Ryam Redwyn gathered at a pavilion on the southern bank of the River Trident, beneath Targaryen banners. They awaited Lord Theon Stark and his bannermen. When the northern party arrived, led by a grim King Theon Stark and his brother Jon Skull, a tense silence filled the pavilion. The northerners' eyes swept over the southern lords, with Theon Stark's gaze settling on King Jaehaerys' empty chair. The two delegations waited, the air thick with the weight of history and the uncertainty of the future, each side poised for the first word that would determine the course of the parley. Sensing the palpable tension and the reluctance of either side to break the silence, Lord Roderick Arryn, Warden of the East, stepped forward. His voice, though calm and measured, carried a note of authority that commanded the attention of all present. Lord Stark, he began, his gaze sweeping across the northern delegation, we thank you for making the journey. The road from Winterfell is long, and these are troubled times. Before Lord Arryn could continue, a murmur of protest arose from the northern bannermen. Your Grace, one of them growled, his voice rough and defiant. Several other northern lords echoed the sentiment, their voices a low rumble of discontent. Theon Stark raised a hand, his gesture silencing his bannermen. His face, though stern, held a hint of weariness. Enough, he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority that brooked no argument. Lord Arryn speaks the truth. These are troubled times, and we have more pressing matters to discuss than titles and courtesies. Though I suspect the road from Winterfell was not as long as you Southerners think, he turned his gaze back to Lord Arryn, his expression firm. Please, continue, Lord Arryn. Lord Arryn continues, there is no need for war between us. Let the royal decree pass. The crown has said they will grant a favor in return. Before Lord Arryn could elaborate, a low growl rumbled through the northern lords. A favor, one of them scoffed, his voice laced with indignation. A favor for surrendering our ancient rights. For bending the knee to a foreign king after generations of independence. Aye, another added, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. What favor could possibly be worth the shame of betraying our heritage? Theon Stark, however, remained impassive, his gaze fixed on Lord Arryn. He raised a hand slightly, silencing his restless bannermen. The tension in the pavilion thickened, the air crackling with unspoken defiance and simmering resentment. The restraint of the northern lords was not matched by their southern counterparts. Lord Lannister, ever quick to anger, rose to his feet, his face flushed with indignation. Enough of this northern bluster. He spat, his voice dripping with disdain. You speak of ancient rights. You are rebels. Savages who cling to outdated customs and defy the king's law. Savages. Lord Baratheon bellowed, his booming voice echoing through the pavilion. They are little better than wildlings. Untamed and unruly, they know nothing of civilization or proper fealty. They are barbarians, Lord Tyrell added, his voice smooth but laced with venom. Living in their frozen wasteland, worshipping trees, and resisting the progress of the realm. They should be grateful for the king's attention, not demanding concessions. The northern lords, who had endured the insults with stony silence, finally found their voices. Lord Ricewell, his face etched with cold fury, stepped forward. We are not the savages you paint us to be, southern lords, he said, his voice sharp and clear. We are the descendants of the first men, who held this land when your ancestors were still painting themselves blue and cowering in caves. Lord Dustin, his gaze sweeping across the assembled southerners, added, we have our own knowledge, our own traditions, forged in the crucible of long winters and harsh realities. We are not greedy for power like you, nor are we craven in the face of danger. We have defended this realm from wildlings, from slavers, and from any who dared to threaten our borders, long before your dragons graced these shores. Lord Umber, his voice a low rumble that nonetheless commanded attention, spoke last. All we ask is what is our right. We ask for what is ours, not as a favor, but as a matter of justice. Lord Arryn, seeing the parley teetering on the brink of collapse, stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. My lords, please, he said, his voice calm but firm, striving to diffuse the escalating tension. Let us not descend into insults and accusations. We are here to find a path forward, a way to avoid the bloodshed that threatens to engulf this realm. He turned to address Lord Stark directly. Lord Stark, the king asks for your surrender. He believes this is the only way to prevent the deaths of thousands, Northmen and Southmen alike. As a sign of good faith and to ensure the future peace of the realm, these are his terms. Lord Arryn paused, and the terms were. You will take the Black, and serve the Night's Watch. Your grandson will be sent to King's Landing, to serve as a ward to Prince Aemon. The gift, that stretch of land south of the Wall, will be granted to the Night's Watch in perpetuity. and there will be a 20% increase in the taxes levied on the north. A tense silence followed these pronouncements. Then, a voice, cold and clear, cut through the stillness. Jono's skull, who had been sitting beside his brother, rose to his feet. These are the terms of the North, he declared, his gaze sweeping across the stunned southern lords. The North will remain independent, as it has always been. We will swear no oaths to your king, pay no tribute, and send no hostages. King Jaehaerys, who had remained seated and silent throughout the tense exchange, finally erupted. The Northmen's defiant response shattered the fragile hope of a peaceful resolution, and a torrent of royal fury poured forth. Insolence! He roared, his voice echoing through the pavilion, causing several lords to flinch. Insolence beyond measure. After all the concessions offered, after our willingness to even parley with such blatant treason, you dare to dictate terms. You, a collection of frozen barbarians, clinging to your petty kingdom as if it were some divine right. The Iron Throne has rules these lands, and you, Stark, are nothing but a rebellious dog nipping at its heels. His face was a mask of incandescent rage, his eyes blazing like dragonfire. Independence. He spat the word as if it were a venomous serpent. You will have independence in your graves. You will learn what it means to defy the blood of the dragon, to reject the rightful authority of your king. I offered you a chance for peace, a path to avoid utter destruction, and you have thrown it back in my face with such arrogant contempt. Prepare yourselves, Northmen, for the storm that is coming. Prepare to learn the true meaning of fear when the dragons take to the sky. Despite the king's furious outburst, Jono's skull remained standing, his face betraying no fear or anger. His voice, when he spoke, was calm and steady, a stark contrast to Jaehaerys' enraged bellowing. Used for your benefit, Jaehaerys Targaryen, Jonos began, his gaze unwavering. For decades, the North has bled under the rule of the Iron Throne. We have been nothing more than a frozen wasteland to be bled of its wealth, a source of coin for your southern ambitions and lavish spending. He continued, his voice gaining a subtle edge of bitterness. Were we ever consulted on matters of the kingdom? Were our voices ever heard in the halls of King's Landing when decisions that affected our very lives were made? No, we were a distant land, a source of taxes and little else. Our traditions were ignored, our concerns dismissed, our people treated as an afterthought. Jonos's eyes swept across the assembled southern lords, his expression challenging. 30 million dragons, he stated, the number hanging heavy in the air. 30 million dragons have flowed from the north to your coffers since King Jaehaerys ascended the Iron Throne. And how much have the other kingdoms contributed, I wonder? Half, perhaps, less. He paused, letting his words sink in. If this is not injustice, Jaehaerys Targaryen, then tell me, what is? We have borne this burden in silence for too long, hoping for a measure of fairness that has never come. Our independence is not born of mere defiance, but of a desperate need to govern ourselves, to protect our people and to keep the fruits of our labor for the benefit of the North, not to fuel the endless appetites of the South. Jono's skull continued, his voice resonating with conviction. Torrhen Stark bent the knee, yes. He did so for his people, to spare them the dragon's fire, and for the promise of protection for his kingdom. That was a pact made in a time of conquest, a pragmatic decision born of necessity. But we, his descendants, will not stand idly by while you southern lords view the North as nothing more than a pawn in your political games. We will not allow our ancient ways to be eroded by your southern ambitions, nor will we tolerate the spreading of your foreign faith within our borders. Theon Stark, who had been listening intently to Jonos, raised his hand once more, a silent command that immediately hushed the impassioned lord. He turned his gaze slowly, deliberately, surveying each of the assembled southern lords within the tent. His eyes, the gray of a winter storm, lingered on Lord Lannister's sneering face, then swept across the impassive visages of Lord Baratheon and Lord Tyrell. He noted the unwavering gaze of Lord Arryn, the grim countenance of Lord Velaryon, and the quiet intensity of the Redwyne brothers. Finally, his gaze settled upon King Jaehaerys, who watched him with a mixture of fury and something akin to grim anticipation. For a long moment, the two kings held each other's stare, the unspoken chasm between their cultures and their ambitions stretching wide and deep. The air in the tent crackled with the weight of their silent confrontation. Then, Theon Stark spoke, his voice low and steady, carrying a chilling finality that echoed through the pavilion. His eyes never leaving Jaehaerys's, we will meet you, on the battlefield. 24 comments 0 vote. War on C1. 77 AC. Salt Spear. Marin Greyjoy Pav. The salt-laced wind whipped through my hair, carrying the tang of the sea and the promise of longships dancing on northern waves. Beneath my boots, the deck of the black wind vibrated with the steady rhythm of oars, a familiar heartbeat that resonated deep within my bones. Behind us, a formidable shadow stretched across the churning gray, 250 longships, a black tide poised to crash against the green shores of the north. A grim satisfaction settled in my gut. Finally, a chance to show these soft, green landers the true meaning of strength, the iron will that had carved our kingdom from the unforgiving waves. They spoke of honor and chivalry, of flowery words and knelt knees. We spoke of iron and salt, of what a man could take with his own two hands. Their gods were silent stones, ours roared with the crashing surf. Beside me, Tytos Lannister stood at the railing, his crimson cloak snapping in the wind. His face, a reflection of his brother Taimon's proud features, held a tightly controlled anticipation. He was a lion leashed, eager for the hunt. These mainlanders, even the fiercest among them, lacked the true grit forged in the crucible of the Iron Islands. They fought for land and titles. We fought for the thrill of the raid, for the taking, for the very breath in our lungs. 2 days, you reckon? Titos's voice cut through the wind, his gaze fixed on the distant, hazy outline that must be Blazewater Bay. His accent, so different from the harsh drawl of the Isles, still held a certain authority. He was a lion, after all, even if one accustomed to manicured gardens rather than storm-lashed cliffs. I grunted, my eyes narrowed as I studied the horizon. With a fair wind. Blazewater Bay, a fitting name for what we're about to unleash. A flicker of a grim smile touched my lips. Let their waters burn with the fury of the drowned gods chosen. Tytos shifted, his curiosity evident. So, what's the strategy, then, Lord Commander? He used the title with a hint of deference, a mainland courtesy I neither expected nor particularly cared for. But he was a useful tool, this lion, his men adding to the sheer weight of our assault. I turned to him, the spray of the sea misting my weathered face. Simple, Lannister. As soon as the black wind cuts through the mouth of Blazewater Bay, the fleet splits. I'll take 150 of our fastest ships, my own Bannerman, the Drum, the Botley, the Good Brother, and strike hard and fast. Bear Island first. Show those bears what happens when you defy the Iron Throne. Then Deepwood Motte, pluck the Glovers like ripe fruit. Finally, Sea Dragon Point. I gestured towards the remaining longships, their black sails stark against the gray sky. You, Lannister, will command the other 100. Your task is no less vital. Head to Flint's Finger first. Silence their witchfires. Then north to Frost Keep on the stony shore. Leave no stone unturned, no soul unblooded. We will sow chaos and fear along their entire western coast, preventing them from sending aid east. By the time they even realize the true extent of our attack, their shores will be aflame, and the northern shore will be crippled. The wind carried my words out over the waves, a promise of fire and ruin for the Greenlanders. The game had begun. Tytos shifted, a shadow of doubt crossing his face. What of their fleet, though? The Northmen are no strangers to the sea. What if they challenge us? He gestured towards the massed longships, a silent question hanging in the air. I scoffed, a harsh bark of laughter that mingled with the cries of the gulls overhead. Their fleet? What fleet? A few fishing boats and a handful of longships hugging their coast, clinging to their shores like frightened children to their mothers' skirts. What can their measly 50 ships do against 250 ironborn reavers, sailing under the banner of the Kraken? They'll be scattered like leaves in a storm, sunk to the bottom of the sea to feed the crabs and the drowned god. Tytos Lannister's brow furrowed deeper, his gaze fixed on the churning water ahead, as if he could already see phantom sails on the horizon. I think there will be more than 50, he said slowly, his voice laced with a caution that grated on my ironborn sensibilities. We know nothing truly of what the North is capable of. All the news that reaches the South, all we hear, comes filtered through the accounts of merchants, men more concerned with profit than with the strength of lords. He turned to me, his green eyes earnest. My house has tried for decades to place reliable spies within the northern keeps, to gain some understanding of their defenses, their numbers. Every single one has vanished. Gone without a trace. It is as if the very land swallows them whole. That kind of silence, it speaks volumes, Lord Greyjoy. It suggests a discipline, a vigilance that 50 longships might not be enough to overcome easily. Tytos shifted uneasily, his hand instinctively going to the hilt of his sword. I think we should be cautious in our approach. To underestimate them based on a lack of information could be a grave mistake. Perhaps a more measured advance. His suggestion hung in the salty air, a discordant note in the ironborn war song I already had playing in my head. Cautious. Lannister, you sound like a craven merchant yourself. What is there to fear from a land of ice and wolves? Their ships are nothing compared to our longships, their sailors soft hands who've never tasted the true fury of the sea. 50 or 500, it matters little. The ironborn in their prime can take any shore. Tytos's jaw tightened, a flicker of Lannister pride in his eyes. Pride is a poor substitute for knowledge, Lord Greyjoy. And the silence from the north is unsettling. It speaks of a people who keep their secrets well, who do not broadcast their strengths. Missing spies, that is not the mark of a weak foe, but a wary one. Wary or weak, the result will be the same, I retorted, my gaze sweeping across the vast expanse of the sea. They have had their time of peace, their soft southern ways creeping into their frozen kingdom. It has made them complacent. We will be the storm that wakes them, the iron fist that shatters their illusions of safety. And if that storm breaks against a hidden reef? Tytos countered, his voice firm despite my dismissiveness. What then, Lord Greyjoy? What if their numbers are greater than we suspect? What if those missing spies stumbled upon something we cannot yet imagine? A cautious approach allows us to assess, to adapt. Adapt. We are ironborn. We don't adapt, we conquer. I slammed my fist on the railing, the wood groaning under the impact. Hesitation is death on the waves, Lannister. We strike hard, we strike fast, before they even have time to organize their pitiful defenses. Fear is our greatest weapon, and it is best served hot and sudden. Tytos remained unconvinced, his gaze still troubled. But a swift strike against an unseen enemy, it is like swinging blindly in the dark. Intelligence, Lord Greyjoy, is as vital as any axe. We sail into their waters blind, relying only on outdated rumors and the boasts of merchants. Rumors enough to know they are not seafaring folk. I roared, my patience wearing thin with this landlubber's trepidation. Their strength is in the frozen earth beneath their feet, not the waves. Let them keep their secrets on land. The sea is our domain, and in our domain, we are unmatched. Perhaps, Tytos conceded, a hint of steel entering his voice. But even the mightiest lion can be brought down by a pack of unseen wolves. I simply urge caution, Lord Greyjoy. For the sake of our men, for the sake of victory. I grunted, turning back to the horizon. Your caution is noted, Lannister. But my course is set. We raid, we take, we return with plunder and glory. That is the Iron Way. And it has served us well for centuries. Worry about your land-bound wolves. The sea belongs to the Kraken. Tytos fell silent then, his gaze fixed on the approaching coastline. Whether he was convinced or simply resigned, I couldn't say. But as the first tendrils of Blazewater Bay began to appear on the horizon, a grim anticipation settled over the black wind. Soon enough, we would both see who was right. The sea would have its say. 2 days of sailing, the iron rhythm of the oars a constant pulse beneath my feet. The salt spray had long since dried on my leathers, leaving a white crust that spoke of the miles devoured. Now, the jagged silhouette of Cape Kraken loomed to starboard, a final tooth guarding the entrance to Blazewater Bay. The green land was drawing near, the air growing thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, a stark contrast to the clean, sharp tang of the open sea. A grim anticipation coiled in my gut. This was it. The moment the Ironborn would once again taste mainland blood, would remind the Greenlanders that the sea was ours to plunder. I could almost feel the thrill of the raid, the satisfying crunch of steel on bone, the terrified screams of the Greenlanders as their false sense of security shattered. Then, just as the black wind began to round the final promontory of Cape Kraken, as the wide expanse of Blazewater Bay opened before us, a sound ripped through the air, sharp and violent. It wasn't the familiar crack of a sail catching the wind or the groan of timbers under strain. This was the unmistakable roar of thunder, but not the natural fury of a storm. This thunder echoed from the west, from the direction of Flint's Finger, a distant yet ominous pronouncement. Before I could even fully process the incongruous sound, a collective shout went up from the ships closest to the black wind. I followed their horrified gazes. Off to our port side, one of our own longships, a sturdy vessel bearing the black sails of House Drum, shuddered violently. Then, with a sickening crack that echoed across the water, its mainmast splintered and crashed down, rigging snapping like brittle bones, the sail collapsing into a tangled mess. A collective gasp rippled through the fleet. This was no accident. Something was terribly wrong. 21 comments 0 vote. War on C2. 77 AC. Flint's Fingers. 2 days before Southern Fleet entered Blazewater Bay. Brian Mormont's perspective. Flint's Finger War Room. The air within the cramped war room at Flint's Finger hung heavy with anticipation. Maps with their intricate lines charting the jagged contours of the northern coastline, each inlet and headland a silent witness to the impending clash. Lords are gathered around the table, their faces etched with a grim determination that mirrors the unforgiving landscape they swore to protect. Robert Glover, the Lord of Deepwood Motte, stood with his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the depiction of Blazewater Bay. A man of quiet resolve, his loyalty to House Stark in the north ran deeper than the roots of the ancient trees in his wolfswood. Beside him, Ragnar Lothbrok, a seasoned warrior, leaned forward, his keen blue eyes, sharp and assessing, tracing the enemy's likely approach. To my right, Donal Flint, the Lord of Breakstone Hill, pointed out potential ambush points with a calloused finger. 150. The stark reality of our naval strength compared to the looming threat etched itself in the silence of the room. Against the 250 longships reported bearing the Kraken sigil, our numbers seemed meager. Yet, within the depths of our northern hearts, a fierce conviction burned. Numbers alone did not dictate victory. We possessed weapons and strategies that the arrogant Southrons, blinded by their self-proclaimed superiority, could never anticipate. A ghost of a smile, cold and sharp as winter ice, flickered across my lips as my gaze drifted towards the hidden schematics tucked beneath the primary map. Cannons. Our own northern ingenuity made manifest, crude iron beasts capable of raining thunder on the enemy. And our ships, they were not the graceful galleys that plied the warm southern waters, nor the solely oar-driven longships favored by the ironborn. Our vessels were built for this land, for the unpredictable currents and the treacherous shallows of our coastline, powered by the relentless churn of coal-fed engines, capable of a speed that would leave any sail-driven vessel floundering in our wake. They would sail into our trap oblivious, never comprehending the storm that awaited them. Once they round the tip of Cape Kraken, I murmured, my voice low and steady, tracing the familiar outline of the land with a calloused finger, the maw of Blazewater Bay will open before them, a siren's call promising easy plunder. It is there, in our waters, that their arrogance will be their undoing. Ragnar Lothbrok nodded, a predatory gleam intensifying in his blue eyes. Let them taste the bite of the north, Brine Mormont. Let their iron pride shatter against the unyielding will of the wolf. The cannons first, I reiterated, my voice hardening with the weight of command. Concealed along the cliffs that guard the bay, shrouded by pines. When their black sails fill the expanse of our waters, we unleash hell. A coordinated volley that will rip through their vaunted formations, sowing chaos and fear in their iron hearts. They will anticipate grappling hooks and boarding axes, the brutal dance of ship-to-ship combat. They will never fathom the iron rain that descends from the land itself. Donald Flint, his hand instinctively resting on the pommel of his ancestral flint blade, his gaze as sharp and unforgiving as the rocks of his namesake, finally spoke, his voice a low growl that resonated with the land itself. And when their neat little Kraken's dance is broken, Lord Mormont. Then, I declared, my fist clenching on the worn wood of the table, the force of my conviction echoing in the tense silence, we unleash the hounds. Our ships, swift and relentless, will tear through their panicked ranks, striking like wolves. We target their flagships, the vessels bearing their arrogant lords. We will capture them, every high lord who dares to set foot on our shores. Let the ironborn taste the bitter tang of defeat on northern steel, let the south witness the unyielding strength of the north when it is finally roused from its slumber. This will not be a mere defense of our homes, it will be a crippling blow to their invasion, a lesson etched in blood and fire upon the very waves they claim as their own. By the time the long shadows of dusk stretch across Blazewater Bay, the Kraken's arrogance will be drowned in the cold, unforgiving waters of the north. Ragnar, I asked, my gaze sharp and unwavering, turning to the seasoned warrior whose connection to the old ways ran deep. Have your wargs located the southern fleet yet? Do we have confirmation of their approach? Ragnar nodded, his blue eyes, clear and piercing, meeting mine. Aye, Brine, they have been tracking them since they left the shores of the Iron Islands. They are arrogant in their numbers, unaware of the welcome we have prepared. He paused, a hint of a wolfish grin playing on his lips. 2 days. They will reach Blazewater Bay in 2 days. They sail blindly into our jaws. I nodded slowly, a grim satisfaction settling in my chest. The pieces were falling into place. Ragnar, I want updates on their position every 4 hours. No deviation. We need to know their exact location and speed. Their arrogance might make them careless, but we cannot afford to be caught unawares. Then, I turned to Donald Flint, my gaze locking with his. Donald, the cannons along the bay are your responsibility. They are our first strike, the teeth that will break the Southrons' assault. You will hold your fire until their entire fleet, all 250 ships, is fully committed within Blazewater Bay. Only then, when retreat becomes a desperate gamble, will you target the last ships in their line. Cripple their rear guard, sow confusion and panic in their ranks. My voice hardened, the steel of command ringing through the room. Once those stragglers reach the shore, those who manage to limp away from the cannon fire, your men will be waiting. Capture every single one of them. But let there be no mercy for those who resist. If they refuse to yield, if they raise a weapon against a northern man, they are to be cut down. Leave their bodies as a warning to those who follow. I addressed the remaining lords, my gaze shifting to Ragnar and Robet. Our men will be positioned along the coast of the Blazewater Bay. Once the cannons have done their work and the ironborn begin to flounder, we will set sail, unleash a volley of cannons. Target their ships. Make them pay for every inch of our water they dare to tread. Robet Glover nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. They will find no welcome here but steel and fire, Lord Mormont. The waiting was the hardest part, a tense silence that stretched like the long northern nights. We pored over the maps again, each of us tracing the enemy's anticipated path, visualizing the chaos we intended to unleash. The thought of the ironborn, those raiders who had plagued our coasts for centuries, finally within our grasp, fueled a cold, burning anticipation within me. 2 days crawled by, each hour marked by Ragnar's grim reports conveyed by his skin changers. The southern fleet advanced relentlessly, their black sails a growing stain on the horizon. The tension in Flint's finger grew palpable, the air thick with the unspoken anticipation of battle. My hand never strayed far from the hilt of my own sword, the cold steel a familiar comfort in the face of the unknown. Finally, the message arrived. The first of the ironborn longships were rounding Cape Kraken, their dark hulls cutting through the gray waters of Blazewater Bay. A hush fell over the war room. This was it. Donal, I said, my voice low but carrying a weight of command that brooked no hesitation. The time is upon us. Let them taste the fury of the North. A grim smile spread across Donal Flint's weathered face. He nodded sharply and strode from the war room, his boots echoing on the stone floor. We could almost feel the anticipation radiating from the cliffs overlooking the bay, the silent readiness of the men poised beside the hidden cannons. With Donal Flint gone to oversee the unleashing of our coastal batteries, a renewed urgency filled the war room. The maps and charts suddenly seemed less important than the feel of solid deck beneath our feet, the tang of the sea air in our lungs. Ragnar, I said, my eyes already turning towards the docks. To the ships. Make sure every vessel is ready to sail. Engines hot, cannons loaded, men at their stations. The ironborn have entered our waters. It is time for the wolves to meet the kraken. Ragnar nodded, his usual quiet intensity now sharpened with the thrill of impending battle. He moved with a swift, purposeful stride, his commands, though few, carrying the weight of absolute authority among his men. Robert Glover, his face set in a grim line, followed without a word, the rustle of his leathers the only sound he made. His loyalty was a silent, unshakable force, and his men would follow him into the jaws of hell if need be. I brought up the rear, my hand resting on the pommel of Longclaw. The weight of the ancestral blade felt reassuring, a connection to generations of Mormonts who had defended this harsh land. As we emerged from the stone confines of Flint's Finger, the sounds of the approaching battle were becoming clearer, the distant, muffled thuds of the shore cannons, the faint, panicked cries carried on the wind. The docks were a scene of controlled chaos. Our northern ships, lean and purposeful, their black smoke already pluming into the gray sky, were alive with activity. Men scurried across the decks, securing lines, checking weapons, their faces a mixture of apprehension and fierce determination. The rhythmic churn of the engines filled the air, a mechanical heartbeat signaling our readiness. All ships, prepare to weigh anchor. I bellowed, my voice cutting through the din. Helm to the bay, let us give these ironborn the welcome they so richly deserve. With a coordinated effort born of long preparation, the mooring lines were cast off. One by one, our northern ships began to move, sleek predators sliding into the choppy waters of Blazewater Bay. The scent of coal smoke mingled with the salt air, a stark declaration that this was a new kind of sea battle, one the ironborn had never encountered. We were sailing towards the sound of the guns, towards the heart of the unfolding chaos, ready to unleash our own brand of northern fury. The instant the deep, guttural roar of the first shore cannon reached our ears, a primal surge of adrenaline coursed through me. This was the signal, the unleashing of the trap we had so meticulously prepared. Now, I bellowed, my voice cutting through the tense anticipation that had gripped the docks. All ships, cast off. Helm to the bay. They have tasted our iron from the land, now let them taste it on the water. The controlled chaos that had simmered on the docks erupted into decisive action. Ropes were cast off with practiced efficiency, the rhythmic churn of the coal-fired engines growing louder as the helmsmen steered their courses towards the widening expanse of Blazewater Bay. Our sleek northern ships, low and swift in the water, began to glide away from the shore, leaving trails of black smoke in their wake. The distant thunder of the shore cannons continued, each booming report a testament to Donal Flint's grim work. Even from here, we could imagine the chaos erupting within the tightly packed ranks of the ironborn fleet. Now it was our turn to join the fray, to add our own iron to the storm. The anticipation of battle, the cold fury that had been simmering within me for generations of ironborn raids, finally found its release in the roar of our engines and the determined faces of the men around me. The kraken had entered our lair, now the wolves would hunt. 23 comments 0 vote. War on C3. 77 AC. Blazewater Bay. Tytos Lannister. 2 days. 2 days since that terse exchange with Meryn Greyjoy on the deck of the Black Wind. His iron arrogance had been as thick as the sea mist, dismissing my concerns about the north with a wave of his calloused hand. What can measly 50 do against 250? He'd scoffed, his eyes gleaming with a bloodlust that seemed to blind him to any potential danger. Now, here I was, standing on the deck of the Red Lion, the Lannister banner snapping proudly in the wind above me. 100 of our finest ships followed in my wake, a crimson shadow mirroring the black tide of the Ironborn ahead. Meryn Greyjoy, true to his word, was leading the charge, the Black Wind a dark spearhead cutting through the grey waters towards Blazewater Bay. Foolish, utterly foolish to charge headlong into an enemy's territory without so much as a whisper of true knowledge. Missing spies, a land that swallowed secrets whole, these were not signs of weakness, but of a cunning opponent. Yet, Greyjoy, consumed by the Ironborn's ingrained recklessness, saw only an easy victory, a chance to plunder and prove their outdated ways. Let the Kraken test the waters. If there were hidden reefs, if the North possessed more teeth than we suspected, let Greyjoy's arrogance be the first to break upon them. My orders to my captains were clear. Maintain formation, observe, and be ready to react. We would follow the Ironborn, yes, but with a measured caution. Let Greyjoy's fleet draw out any hidden defenses, any unexpected strengths. If the North had a surprise waiting, it would be the Ironborn who stumbled into it first. The lion might follow the Kraken, but it would not blindly walk into the jaws of the unknown. Let Greyjoy's bloodlust paint the first strokes of this battle. We Lannisters would learn from his mistakes, and then, we would strike with the calculated precision that was our house's true strength. The bay was wider than I had anticipated, the green shores stretching out on either side, a deceptive tranquility masking whatever lay hidden within. The air was thick with the cries of gulls and the rhythmic splash of oars, a symphony of impending violence. Ahead, the Black Wind and the vanguard of the Ironborn fleet surged forward, their black sails billowing like the wings of some monstrous predator. Then, it happened. The sound was like a crack of thunder, but not the natural fury of a storm. It echoed from behind us, from the rear of our combined fleet, a sharp, violent report that sent a shiver of unease down my spine. Before I could even process the sound, a collective shout rose from the ships closest to the Red Lion. My blood ran cold as I turned to see the source of the commotion. One of our ships, a sturdy vessel bearing the crimson and gold of Lannister, shuddered violently. Its mainmast, a proud spar that had carried our banner across countless leagues, splintered and crashed down, rigging snapping like brittle bones, the sail collapsing into a tangled mess. A collective gasp rippled through our ranks. This was no accident. This was an attack. And then, the thunder came again. And again. And again. The rear of our fleet, both Lannister and Ironborn vessels, was suddenly engulfed in a maelstrom of destruction. Ships erupted in splinters, their hulls torn open, sending plumes of water and debris skyward. Black smoke billowed from the stricken vessels, mingling with the cries of the dying and the terrified. Move away from the shore. I roared, my voice barely audible above the growing cacophony of battle. All ships, turn, fall back to the open sea. But it was too late. The trap had been sprung, and we were caught in its jaws. 15 ships, Lannister and Ironborn, were already lost, reduced to burning wrecks or sinking hulks. The thunderous reports continued, each one a death knell for another vessel. Panic began to spread among our crews. Men scrambled to obey my orders, but the narrow confines of the bay, the chaos of the attack, and the sheer speed of our destruction made any organized retreat a desperate struggle. Ships collided, oars snapped, and the screams of the wounded mingled with the roar of the unseen enemy. I watched in horror as the rear of our fleet was systematically decimated. The cannons, for that was what they had to be, were hidden somewhere along the shore, masked by the treeline or concealed within hidden fortifications. The Northmen had lured us into a kill zone, and we had sailed blindly into their trap. The Greyjoy fleet, further ahead, seemed momentarily untouched by the carnage behind us. They were clearly alarmed by the sudden attack, their captains shouting orders, their longships milling about in confusion. They couldn't see what was happening to the rear, their attention fixed on the open waters ahead, on the promise of plunder and glory. They were oblivious to the slaughter unfolding behind them, to the iron rain that was tearing our fleet apart. Then, just as I began to grasp the true extent of our peril, I saw them. From the far end of the bay, a new threat emerged. A fleet of ships, unlike any I had ever seen, surged forward with terrifying speed. They were not the graceful galleys of the south, nor the oared longships of the Ironborn. These vessels were sleek and low in the water, their hulls cutting through the waves with an unnatural ferocity. Smoke billowed from their stacks, a dark contrast to the wind-filled sails of our ships. Their sigils were stark and unmistakable, the direwolf of Stark, black against a white field. These were northern ships, and they were moving with a speed that defied belief. They were engines of war, propelled by some dark sorcery or some unholy pact with the sea itself. And they were not silent. As they closed the distance, cannons mounted on their decks began to roar, spitting forth their own iron death. But instead of targeting the remnants of our shattered rear guard, they focused their fire on the Greyjoy fleet, on the unsuspecting ironborn who had led this ill-fated invasion. The battle for Blazewater Bay had become a three-way slaughter. We were caught in a crossfire, pounded by the unseen cannons on shore in the relentless assault of the northern ships. The Greyjoy fleet, initially so eager for battle, was now reeling, their longships torn apart by the unexpected onslaught. The northern ships, with their superior speed and firepower, began to maneuver, their captains displaying a tactical acumen that belied the supposed savagery of the north. They were not merely attacking. They were hurting us, forcing us closer and closer to the shore, into the waiting embrace of the hidden cannons. I realized with a sickening certainty that this was not a battle, it was a massacre. We had sailed into a carefully crafted trap, and the Northmen were closing the jaws around us. The arrogance of the Ironborn, and my own miscalculation, had led us to this slaughter. We were caught between the hammer of the shore batteries and the anvil of the northern fleet, and there was no escape. The chaos in Blazewater Bay escalated into a maelstrom of fire, splintered wood, and the screams of dying men. The initial shock of the shore cannons was compounded by the relentless assault of the northern fleet, their engines driving them through the Ironborn ranks with terrifying speed. The Ironborn, accustomed to the brutal simplicity of ramming and boarding, were utterly outmatched by the Northmen's superior maneuverability and long-range firepower. My own ship, the Red Lion, was caught in the crossfire, pounded by cannon fire from both the shore and the northern vessels. I watched in horror as longship after longship succumbed to the onslaught, their black sails collapsing in flames, their hulls ripped open by northern iron. The once proud Ironborn fleet was reduced to a burning graveyard, their dreams of plunder and glory dissolving into the cold reality of destruction. The Lannister ships fared little better. Though we had maintained a more cautious approach than the Ironborn, the sheer volume of fire and the Northmen's relentless tactics overwhelmed us. We tried to maneuver, to form a defensive line, but the northern ships were too fast, too agile. They danced around our lumbering galleys, unleashing volley after volley of cannon fire, tearing us apart at will. I saw Meryn Greyjoy ships exploding, their decks turned into charnels. I heard the screams of my men, the sickening crunch of wood and bone, the hiss of flames consuming everything in their path. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of burning flesh, a testament to the utter devastation unfolding around us. The Northmen, to my astonishment, did not attempt to close and ram. They maintained their distance, their ships weaving through the chaos like wolves circling a dying beast, tearing us apart with their cannons without risking their own hulls. It was a strategy I had never seen before, a cold, calculated efficiency that spoke volumes about the Northmen's ingenuity and their willingness to abandon traditional naval warfare for a more pragmatic approach. Meryn Greyjoy, his flagship the Black Wind, a burning wreck, fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal. He rallied what remained of his fleet, attempting a desperate counterattack, but it was futile. The northern ships surrounded him, their cannons tearing his flagship apart piece by piece. I watched through my spyglass as the Black Wind finally succumbed, its shattered remains swallowed by the waves, taking Meryn Greyjoy and his dreams of conquest with it. With Greyjoy dead and our fleet decimated, resistance crumbled. The Ironborn, their morale shattered, began to surrender in droves, throwing down their weapons and begging for mercy. The Lannister captains, seeing the hopelessness of the situation, followed suit, their proud banners lowered in defeat. The Battle of Blazewater Bay was not a battle, it was a massacre. The Northmen had achieved a complete and utter victory, their innovative tactics and superior ships proving decisive. Of the combined southern fleet that had sailed so confidently into those waters, barely 50 ships remained afloat, and those were crippled, battered, and surrounded. The Northmen, on the other hand, had not lost a single vessel. Their ships, with their powerful engines and devastating cannons, had proven utterly invincible. My own ship, the Red Lion, was heavily damaged, its mast splintered, its hull riddled with holes. We were surrounded by northern vessels, their black sails emblazoned with the direwolf sigil, their cannons trained on us, ready to unleash another volley at the slightest provocation. Resistance was futile. With a heavy heart, I gave the order to surrender. I was taken captive, along with the surviving Lannister lords and captains. We were treated with a cold, almost detached professionalism. There were no taunts, no gloating, only the grim satisfaction of victory. I was informed that I would be sent to Moat Cailin, the ancient fortress that guarded the neck of the north, once the situation in the bay was settled. As I was led away, I looked back at the carnage in Blazewater Bay. The once pristine waters were now a charnel house, littered with burning wreckage, floating corpses, and the debris of a shattered fleet. The stench of smoke and death hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of the price of arrogance and the devastating power of the North when roused to war. The Kraken had been utterly defeated, and the wolves of the north had proven themselves to be masters of the sea. The Seven Kingdoms would never look at the north the same way again. The balance of power had shifted, and the consequences would be felt for years to come. 5 comments 0 vote. War on C4. 77 AC. The Bite. Third person POV. The salt-laced winds of the eastern coast carried the scent of impending doom. The Whispering Sound, a stretch of water known for its treacherous currents and hidden reefs, was about to become a graveyard. Two fleets, vastly different in design and philosophy, converged upon its turbulent surface, their encounter poised to reshape the naval landscape of Westeros. Leading the Northern Armada was Lord Wylis Manderly, a man of quiet determination and strategic acumen. His flagship, the Merman's Pride, a marvel of northern craftsmanship, sliced through the waves with an almost unnatural grace. Behind him, 150 ships, each a testament to northern ingenuity, followed in disciplined formation. These were not the oar-driven longships of old. They were vessels of a new age, powered by coal-fed engines that churned the water with relentless force, their decks bristling with cannons, iron behemoths capable of unleashing a storm of death. Against them sailed the Southern Fleet, a majestic but antiquated force of 250 longships, commanded by Lord Manfred Redwyn, a seasoned admiral renowned for his mastery of traditional naval warfare. His flagship, the Arbor Queen, led the charge, its sails emblazoned with the grapevines of House Redwyn, a symbol of the South's naval might. The Southern Fleet was a sight to behold, a vast armada of oared vessels, their crews a disciplined force honed by years of training. They were confident in their numbers, in their experience, in the traditions that had served them well for centuries. Lord Redwyn, from the high deck of the Arbor Queen, surveyed his fleet with a practiced eye. He saw the rhythmic dip of oars, the disciplined ranks of his marines, the proud banners of the great houses of the south fluttering in the wind. He saw the northern ships in the distance, their silhouettes strange and unfamiliar, and dismissed them as a minor threat. He had numbers, he had experience, and he had the weight of tradition on his side. He did not fear the unknown. As the two fleets drew closer, the disparity between them became starkly apparent. The northern ships moved with a speed and agility that the southern longships could not match. They maneuvered with a precision that bordered on the uncanny, their engines propelling them through the water with a relentless power that left the southern oarsmen struggling to keep pace. Lord Manderly, from the bridge of the Merman's Pride, observed the unfolding scene with a cold, calculating eye. He had drilled his captains for this moment, drilled his crews in the art of this new kind of warfare. He knew that their speed and firepower were their greatest advantages, and he intended to use them to their fullest. The battle began not with the clash of ships, but with the thunderous roar of cannons. The Northern Fleet, maintaining a safe distance, unleashed a devastating barrage upon the unsuspecting Southern ships. Cannonballs tore through wooden hulls, splintering oars and masts, sending men flying into the air. The Southern Fleet, caught completely off guard, was thrown into chaos. Lord Redwyn, his flagship the Arbor Queen shuddering under the impact of the northern fire, watched in horror as his carefully ordered formations dissolved into a chaotic mess. His longships, designed for ramming and boarding, were sitting ducks against the northern cannons, their crews slaughtered before they could even come within striking distance. "Ram them!" he roared, his voice barely audible above the din of battle. "Close the distance! Board their ships!" But his orders were futile. The northern ships, with their superior speed, danced around the lumbering longships, continuing their relentless barrage. They circled the Southern Fleet like wolves around a wounded stag, tearing them apart with impunity. The Tide Dancer, a sleek and swift Valyrian longship adorned with the seahorse flag, attempted a daring maneuver to break through the northern encirclement. Captained by the skilled and audacious Vaemon Velaryon, brother of Lord Corwin Velaryon, the Tide Dancer surged forward, its oarsmen pulling with desperate strength. Vaemon, his eyes blazing with courage, hoped to close the distance and grapple with a northern vessel, hoping to turn the tide with a desperate boarding action. But the northern ship, the Iron Wolf, a heavily armed vessel commanded by a grim-faced northern captain, anticipated his move. It spun on a dime, its engines roaring, bringing its broadside to bear. A volley of cannon fire ripped through the Tide Dancer, tearing a gaping hole in its hull, splintering its oars, and felling dozens of its crew. Vaemon, his dreams of glory shattered, watched in horror as his ship began to list, seawater gushing into its hold. He rallied his remaining men, preparing for a desperate last stand, but another volley sealed their fate. The Tide Dancer, its scarlet sails torn and bloodied, slipped beneath the waves, taking Vaemon Velaryon and his brave crew with it. A group of royal ships, their hulls painted black and their three-headed dragon proudly displayed on their sails, attempted to form a defensive square, hoping to present a unified front against the relentless northern assault. Their captains, seasoned veterans of many a sea battle, barked orders, their voices hoarse with the din of battle, their faces grim but resolute. They knew that their only chance was to hold their formation, to weather the storm of cannon fire, and to hope for an opportunity to close and grapple. But the northern ships, with their ability to maneuver independently and unleash fire from any angle, made short work of this formation. They circled the square, their cannons spitting forth a relentless barrage, turning the defensive formation into a watery grave. One Westerland's captain, his arm severed by a cannonball, continued to bark orders, his face contorted in pain, until another shot tore through his chest, silencing him forever. The crimson-painted longships, once a symbol of Lannister naval power, were reduced to burning wrecks, their golden lions stained with blood and fire. The pride of Aldtown, a massive and heavily armed longship bearing the white tower of House Hightower, attempted a desperate escape. Captained by the proud and stubborn Hobart Hightower, brother of Lord Eustace Hightower, the pride of Aldtown turned its prow and attempted to flee the carnage. But the northern ships, swift and relentless, pursued with grim determination. The pride of Aldtown, despite its size and strength, was no match for the northern engines of war. It was repeatedly struck by cannon fire, its thick wooden hull splintering under the relentless bombardment. Flames began to lick at its sails, then spread to its decks, engulfing the ship in a roaring inferno. Hobart Hightower, his face blackened with smoke, rallied his men, fighting bravely against the encroaching flames, but it was a losing battle. The pride of Aldtown, once a symbol of Aldtown's maritime power, became a blazing funeral pyre, its crew leaping into the water to escape the inferno. Hobart Hightower was among those who did not survive the flames, his life extinguished in the fiery chaos of the battle. Lord Redwyn, witnessing the utter annihilation of his fleet, his face a mask of disbelief and despair, tried desperately to rally his remaining captains. He sent frantic signals, attempting to organize a coordinated withdrawal, but his orders were lost in the chaos of battle. His flagship, the Arbor Queen, was repeatedly struck by cannon fire, its once proud decks now littered with the dead and wounded. Desperate and enraged, Lord Redwyn ordered a final, suicidal charge. The Arbor Queen, its sails tattered and torn, its hull leaking seawater, surged forward, its remaining oarsmen pulling with the strength of desperation. Lord Redwyn, his sword in hand, stood at the prow, a figure of defiance against the overwhelming odds. He hoped to ram a northern vessel, to board and fight in the old way, to die a warrior's death. But the northern ships, with their cold efficiency, showed no mercy. The Arbor Queen was surrounded, pounded by cannon fire from all sides. Its masts splintered, its decks turned into a charnel house. Lord Redwyn, his body riddled with splinters, his face blackened with smoke, fell to the deck, his sword clattering beside him. The Arbor Queen, its proud banners torn and bloodied, finally succumbed to the waves, taking Lord Redwyn and his dreams of victory with it. As the hours wore on, the relentless pounding of the northern cannons took its toll. One by one, the remaining southern ships succumbed, their resistance finally broken. The water around them became a grotesque tapestry of shattered wood, torn sails, and the bloated bodies of the fallen. The air grew heavy with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the sickly sweet scent of blood. The northern ships, their hulls scarred but intact, continued their methodical work, their cannons spitting fire and death with unwavering precision. There was a cold efficiency to their actions, a stark contrast to the desperate chaos of the southern fleet. They were not merely winning a battle, they were demonstrating the obsolescence of traditional naval warfare against the power of technology and tactical innovation. Finally, with the last vestiges of southern resistance extinguished, a hush fell over the whispering sound, broken only by the lapping of waves against the wreckage and the cries of the wounded. The sun had begun its descent, painting the sky in hues of blood red and dying embers, casting long, ominous shadows across the scene of utter devastation. Lord Manderley, his face grim but resolute, surveyed the carnage from the deck of the Merman's Pride. Around him, his ships, their black sails emblazoned with the direwolf sigil, stood silent and victorious. The battle was over. The North had won a decisive and crushing victory. The age of the longship had met its end in the fiery embrace of northern steel. Of the once mighty southern fleet of 250 longships, only 60 remained afloat, and those were crippled, battered, and surrounded. The northern fleet, on the other hand, had not lost a single vessel. Their ships, with their powerful engines and devastating cannons, had proven utterly invincible. The whispering sound ran red, a testament to the devastating power of the North when roused to war. The silence that descended upon the whispering sound after the final cannon shot was heavy, laden with the scent of salt, smoke, and death. The victorious northern fleet, their black sails stark against the bruised twilight sky, moved amongst the wreckage, their crews grimly assessing the devastation. The cries of the wounded, both northern and southern, echoed across the water, a somber counterpoint to the earlier thunder of battle. Amidst the floating debris and the charred remains of once proud warships, the grim task of collecting survivors and taking prisoners began. Northern sailors, their faces hardened by the day's brutal efficiency, rowed small boats amongst the wreckage, pulling the living and the dead from the blood-stained water. Many of the southern lords, their arrogance drowned in the reality of their crushing defeat, were taken captive. Stripped of their arms and their pride, they were hauled aboard the northern ships, their faces etched with shock and despair. Lord Manfred Redwyn, the once proud admiral of the southern fleet, was among them. His once crisp uniform was torn and stained, his usually jovial face now a mask of utter defeat. He stared blankly at the carnage around him, the weight of his catastrophic loss a palpable burden. The captured southern lords, a grim collection of high-born names and shattered ambitions, were held under heavy guard on the northern ships. There were no taunts or jeers from their captors, only a cold, professional efficiency. The Northmen understood the significance of their victory, but their demeanor remained somber, the cost of war evident in their eyes. As the immediate aftermath of the battle began to settle, the logistical task of moving the prisoners to Moat Cailin commenced. The ancient fortress, guarding the narrow neck of the north, was deemed the most secure location to hold such high-ranking captives. Northern ships, their holds now filled with defeated southern lords, began the journey north, leaving behind the ravaged waters of the Whispering Sound. Lord Manfred Redwyn, along with the other captured southern commanders, was transferred to a larger northern vessel for the journey to Moat Cailin. The journey was a silent one, the weight of their defeat hanging heavy in the air. They were prisoners in a strange and formidable land, their futures uncertain, their once powerful fleet reduced to a memory of fire and destruction. The victory on the eastern coast, following the earlier annihilation of the ironborn fleet in Blazewater Bay, sent shockwaves throughout the Seven Kingdoms. The North, long considered a backward and isolated land, had demonstrated a naval power and tactical innovation that no one in the South had foreseen. The age of the traditional longship had been decisively ended, replaced by the terrifying efficiency of northern iron and fire. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted, and the consequences of these devastating defeats would ripple across Westeros, shaping the political landscape for years to come. The captured southern lords, now prisoners within the formidable walls of Moat Cailin, were a stark reminder of the North's newfound strength and the devastating price of underestimating the wolf. 6 comments 0 vote. The Neck. 77 AC. The Neck. Third person Pav. The king's horse sank fetlock deep in mud, every step a struggle. Jaehaerys Targaryen squinted through the pale morning mist, watching the marsh swallow the road ahead and behind. The trees pressed in, gnarled, ancient, their roots thrust like bones from the black earth. Somewhere ahead, his scouts said, the causeway would bend and the mists would thin, but Jaehaerys doubted it. He'd been riding through fog for days. 210 men. It sounded like a host when they set out from Twins. Now, as the army slouched through the Neck, all he could see were hunched figures, mud-caked, cloaks sodden, armor speckled with filth. Banners drooped. The gold and red and silver of the dragon was little more than a stained rag at the head of the column. Behind him, Esser Ryam Redwyn muttered to the captains. Jaehaerys caught fragments, shadows in the reeds, wolves, not men, gone at dawn. He'd heard the same complaints yesterday, and the day before. Always at dawn, another stretcher carried past, another man gone silent in the night. The king pressed his heels to his gelding. Keep moving, he called, voice hoarse. We do not stop until we reach firm ground. The men obeyed. They always did, when he spoke. But he could feel their fear, thick as the mist. Esser Ryam rode with his visor down, though it fogged with every breath. He wanted the steel between his face and whatever watched from the trees. Each day, the column shrank. At first, it was men who lagged behind, lost in the fog, never to be seen again. Then, arrows, short, crude, but deadly, hummed out of the green and took horses. Once, at dusk, a pack of dogs burst from the shadows, snapping at flanks and ankles, gone before a sword could be drawn. He'd fought on grassy fields and in walled towns, behind shield and helm, sword against sword. But here, in the Neck, there was no enemy to see, just the endless sucking of the mud and the whisper of things moving in the reeds. He'd never felt so useless. You could not charge a shadow. You could not hold a line against mist. At noon, a shout rose ahead, a warning. Ryam spurred forward, heart pounding. The vanguard had found a dead man, throat cut, boots missing. One of their own, but which? No one could say. Names were lost, like everything else. He looked up at the king, who sat his horse like a statue. He wondered if Jaehaerys felt it too, the sense that the swamp itself meant to swallow them whole. The wounded filled his dreams. Fever, flesh gone black from bites, arrow wounds festering in the wet. Corys wrote their names in his ledger, but the names blurred, the ink running in the constant drizzle. He had begged the king to turn back. You cannot fight the Neck, he'd said. It's not land, it's water and ghosts. Jaehaerys only smiled, the calm smile of a man who knew he must not show fear. So Corys worked, his tent a patch of order in the muck. He boiled water, cleaned wounds, and whispered prayers to the seven. He'd stopped asking what killed the men who came to him, half mad with terror, faces bloodless. He just worked. One night, a boy was brought in, William, wide-eyed, shaking, his arms slashed open. Saw them, master, the boy whispered. Little men in the water. Saw their eyes. They laughed at me. Corys pressed a cloth to the wound. You're alive, he said. That's what matters. He'd marched for days, feet blistered, hands raw from hauling carts when the horses failed. At night, he curled up with the other boys, listening to the sounds from the water. Sometimes it was frogs, or birds, or just the wind. Sometimes, it was voices. He saw them once, little men, half swallowed by the reeds, faces painted green and brown. They moved without a sound. Willem tried to warn the others, but they laughed at him. Until the wolves came. The wolves were half wild, lean and silent. They struck at dusk, snapping at the weakest. Willem ran, tripped, fell. When he looked up, a Cranogman stood over him, blade in hand. But the man just smiled and vanished, as if swallowed by the swamp. Since then, Willem woke every hour, sure he'd never see dawn. He slid through the water, feeling the mud suck at his feet. The Southerners were loud, iron and leather clattering, voices raised in anger and fear. They stank of wine and horse and fear. Easy to follow, easier to harry. He watched them from the shelter of the reeds. At night, he crept closer, knife in hand. Sometimes he took a boot, sometimes a life. The wolves did the rest. He'd grown up in the neck, learned to hunt on land that was half water, half shadow. The land was his weapon. It would kill these men long before they reached Moat Cailin. He slipped back into the mist, silent as the grave. Each day, the column shrank by a handful of men. Some slipped away in the night, cowards, deserters, perhaps, but Jaehaerys suspected most simply vanished. Lost in the fog, snatched by the swamp, or claimed by the silent archers who melted into the water. He kept the tally himself. 206, 203, 198. He watched the numbers dwindle as if each soul lost weight upon his shoulders alone. He rode at the head, silver hair plastered to his brow, eyes scanning the horizon for a glimpse of the fabled causeway, the bricks of the first men rising from the muck. Some nights, he dreamed of dragons, Aegon's conquest, fire and blood, but every dawn brought only the endless, gray-green world and the stink of decay. He forced himself to keep his back straight, his voice steady. Hold the line. Stay together. The neck will not break us. He wondered if he lied. The men looked to Ryam Redwyn for courage, but Ryam felt it slipping through his fingers with every step. The horses fared worst. One by one, they fell lame, their hoofs rotting in the wet, and had to be put down. The men butchered the carcasses for meat, grateful for a hot meal, but even the flesh tasted of swamp. Ryam's armor was a prison of rust. He had not slept a full night in a fortnight. In the Reach, armies broke on open field. Here, they simply melted away. He tried to organize watches, sent out patrols, but they never returned. One morning, he awoke to find 3 men missing. No sign, no struggle, just their gear left behind. In their place, he found a message. A crude carving in a tree, a frog squatting atop a crown. Cranogman, he spat, mocking us. But he wondered, was the neck itself mocking them, too? Maester Corys's hands trembled as he mixed herbs for fever. The wounded outnumbered the hail. Men coughed blood and shivered, their lips blew. The bites festered, and the water, always the water, brought sickness they had no names for. He took notes, scribbled in the margins of his ledger, unknown fever. Swelling, black tongue. He tried to help, but with each day, his supplies dwindled. He'd sent men to gather herbs, but only one returned, half mad and raving about ghostly lights in the mist. He saw the king sometimes, watching the men, jaw clenched. Corys pitied him. Even a dragon could not burn away mist. William thought of old tales, the ones he'd dismissed as a boy, about the neck's haunted waters and the frog-eaters who could vanish at will. Now, he believed every word. He kept to the center of the line now, as far from the reeds as he could. The others did the same, huddling together like sheep. They'd stopped joking days ago. No songs, no laughter, just the squelch of boots and the flutter of banners that no longer meant anything. He saw faces in the mist sometimes, pale, wide-eyed, flickering in and out of the trees. The wolves were gone now, but something worse came at night. Arrows, silent and sharp, that struck without warning. Once, Willem saw a man die with barely a cry, an arrow sprouting from his chest, blood blooming on his surcoat. He missed home. He missed dry ground, his mother's bread, the sound of his little sister's voice. He prayed to the seven that would listen. He tried not to listen when the mist whispered his name. The Southerners were breaking. Krangoman scouts saw it in their eyes, in the way they clung to the causeway, refused to stray from the stones. They moved like cattle, slow and frightened. He crept close, breathing the scent of iron and sweat. He watched the tall knight curse the swamp, watched the old man tend the dying. He saw the boy, so young, so afraid, stumble on the path. Tonight, he and his kin would strike again. They would loose their arrows from the shadows, slip among the tents and steal another handful away. The wolves would feast. He pitied them, a little. They did not belong here. The neck took what it wanted. He melted into the reeds, knife glinting in the moonlight. The king called a council, what was left of it. Esser Ryam, Maester Corrys, Rogar Baratheon, Eustace Hightower, Tymond Lannister, Corwin Velaryon, Prince Aemon and Prince Baelon. They huddled beneath a sagging pavilion, torches flickering in the damp. We cannot go on like this, Rogar said, voice thin. We lose men every night. The fever spreads. Baelon slammed his fist on the table. We must strike back, hunt them in the dark, show them we are not afraid. Jaehaerys listened, face unreadable. He felt the weight of two kingships, the one he wore, and the one he might lose, here in the mud. We move at first light, he said. We keep to the causeway. Any man caught wandering will be flogged. We do not break ranks. Not for anything, until we reach Moat Cailin, if not. He did not finish. The men stared at the table, silent. Willem did not sleep that night. He watched the mist swirl outside the tent, heard soft voices, maybe men, maybe not. He shivered, teeth chattering, and clutched his knife. Sometime before dawn, he heard footsteps. He sat up, heart pounding. A shadow moved just beyond the torchlight, small and quick. He squeezed his eyes shut. When he opened them, the shadow was gone. But so was the man sleeping next to him. He did not scream. He did not tell anyone. In the morning, he marched with the others, eyes fixed on the king's banner, praying it would lead them out of the swamp. Cranogman Scout counted the Southerners as they marched, their numbers thinned. He marked the faces of the dead, the wounded, the broken. He wondered how many would reach the stones of Moat Cailin. He dipped his fingers in the water, whispered a prayer to the old gods. The neck would keep its secrets. Tonight, he would strike again. By the seventh day, the king could taste the swamp on his tongue. It was in his hair, his beard, his very bones, a sickness, a weariness that no fire could burn away. His first horse was gone, a twisted ankle and a mercy killing at dawn. He tried to count the men, but numbers meant little now. The banners were gone, used for cloaks or lost in the night. Once, he would have named every lord, every knight. Now, he saw only faces. Hollow, haunted, peering through mud and mist. He forced himself to march at their head. If the king faltered, all hope would break. They moved in a ragged column, pressed close, eyes darting to the shadows. Every sound was danger, a distant splash, the sudden whine of an arrow, the low growl of a wolf just beyond sight. Somewhere ahead, the ground would rise. They said the stones of Moat Cailin could not be drowned, not even by the neck itself. Ryam's sword arm ached, but he refused to sheath the blade. Twice in the night, he'd fought off shadows, Cranogmen with knives and painted faces, darting in and out of the tents. One had nearly slit his throat. Ryam's mail had saved him, but the boy next to him wasn't so lucky. He'd lost count of the dead. The marsh had claimed them, leaving only ripples and bubbles and the occasional, drifting boot. The men muttered of curses, of old gods and vengeful spirits, and Arlen could not bring himself to silence them. He believed it, too. At midday, the column halted. A narrow spit of land, firmer than the rest, loomed ahead. Arlen scouted it, blade drawn, breath shallow. The trees thinned, the mist parted just enough to reveal stones. Huge stones, black with age, rising from the water like the backs of ancient beasts. Moat Cailin, he whispered, hardly daring to hope. Maester Corrys stumbled, nearly falling into the muck. He'd lost his ledger days ago, dropped in the dark during a sudden flight from arrows. Now, he carried only a pouch of herbs, a rusted dagger, and his memories, the faces of the men he'd tried to save, the names he could no longer recall. He paused to tend a man coughing up blood. There were fewer wounded now, not because the attacks had stopped, but because so few remained. Corrys did what he could, but mostly he offered comfort. A touch on the shoulder, a whispered word, a promise of rest that he knew was a lie. He saw the king, silver hair streaked with mud, eyes sunken but unbroken. He saw Arlen, wild and desperate, blade red with blood not all their own. And he saw Willem, the boy clinging to the tattered remnants of his courage, eyes wide with a kind of holy terror. When the scouts returned, whispering of stone towers ahead, Corrys wept. Relief, exhaustion, and grief mingled in his tears. He wondered who would tell the tale of this march, and who would remember the dead. Willem barely recognized himself. His hands were raw, his clothes nothing but rags. Hunger gnawed at his belly, and every step sent a jolt of pain through his feet. He kept walking because he could not stop, because to stop was to die. When the cry went up, stones. The stones, he almost didn't believe it. He pushed forward, stumbling, breath coming in ragged sobs. The mist parted, just for a moment, and there it was. Black stone, ancient and massive, rising from the earth. Moat Cailin. Some men wept. Some fell to their knees. Willem just stared, numb. He'd survived. He did not know how, or why, but he had. Behind them, the swamp swallowed their tracks. Cranogman Scout watched from the water as the last of the southerners crawled onto the stones. They were less than what had entered the neck. The rest belonged to the land now. He felt no triumph, only a quiet satisfaction. The neck had done its work. Moat Cailin would hold, as it always had. No southern king could tame these waters. No dragon could burn away the mist. He turned and slipped into the reeds, gone before the king's men could glimpse him. Jaehaerys stood atop the causeway, boots on solid stone at last. The towers of Moat Cailin loomed above, battered and crumbling but unbowed. He looked back at the survivors, ragged, broken, but alive. "We have made it," he said, voice hoarse. "The neck is behind us." No one cheered. The silence was deeper than any song. He knew the truth. The neck was never behind. It was inside them now. Mud in their blood, mist in their dreams, a ghost at every campfire. He would remember this march for as long as he lived. He wondered if he would ever be clean again. The land was quiet again. The men had gone, their blood and bones feeding the roots of the old trees. The mist rolled in, and the Cranogman slipped through the water, whispering to the frogs and the ghosts. The neck watched and waited. It always did. And far to the south, a king dreamed of dragons, and woke with mud beneath his nails. 10 comments 0 vote. War Council. 77 AC. Outside Moat Cailin. Third person Pav. The king's tent, a temporary sanctuary amidst the hostile landscape of the neck, offered little comfort. The thick canvas trapped the humid air, mingling with the earthy stench of the surrounding swamp and the unwashed bodies of men weary beyond measure. Around the crudely fashioned table, its surface a chaotic landscape of stained maps and roughly carved markers, the King's War Council had gathered. Outside, the flickering torchlight cast long, dancing shadows through the perpetual mist, and in the distance, the formidable silhouette of Moat Cailin loomed, a black, jagged tooth against the pale sky. King Jaehaerys Targaryen stood at the head of the table, his silver-gold hair, usually so lustrous, now dull and tangled, a simple circlet of dark gold his only adornment. He looked the weight of the grueling campaign, lines etched deep around his usually vibrant violet eyes, his mouth a thin, resolute line. "We have reached Moat Cailin at last," he began, his voice steady despite the evident strain, "but let no man believe our ordeal is at an end." His gaze, heavy with the burden of command, swept over his assembled lords and kin. Esser Ryam Redwyn, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, stood tall and unyielding, his once gleaming white armor now coated in layers of mud and grime, his stern face a testament to the hardships endured. Lord Rhaegar Baratheon, broad-shouldered and restless, his usual booming voice subdued, his dark eyes flickering with a barely contained impatience. Lord Eustace Hightower, gaunt and pale, his fingers a nervous tattoo against the hilt of his sword, his intellectual brow furrowed with concern. Lord Tymond Lannister, his golden hair matted and dull, yet a sardonic half-smile still played upon his lips, a flicker of his characteristic cynicism even in this dire situation. Lord Corwin Velaryon, his face weathered by years at sea, his sharp eyes constantly assessing, ever vigilant. And his sons, the Princes Aemon and Balon, stood shoulder to shoulder, their youthful features shadowed by the grim realities of the neck, their eagerness for action barely concealed. Jaehaerys gestured to the battered map, its surface a testament to their arduous journey. "We arrived with 210,000 strong. We now number 190,000. 20,000 men swallowed by the neck. The silent ambushes of the wolves and Cranogman, the insidious grip of fever, the gnawing emptiness of hunger. The men are weary, their spirits frayed, and what stands before us is no mere castle to be stormed. Moat Cailin is strong in ways no southern stronghold can comprehend. I would hear your counsel. How do we breach this?" Lord Rhaegar Baratheon's large fist slammed onto the table, rattling the maps and tokens. "We cannot afford to linger, Your Grace," he declared, his voice rough with impatience. "Every hour we delay, more men succumb to sickness, more courage leaches from their souls. The Cranogmen will continue their relentless harassment, and the enemy within those black walls grows bolder with each passing day. Let us strike, and strike now, before our strength utterly fails." Lord Eustace Hightower shook his head slowly, his pale face etched with concern. A rash assault, my lord, will break us against those ancient stones. Moat Cailin has never fallen from the south. Its walls are thick, its towers command the narrow causeway, a killing ground designed to funnel attackers into a deadly embrace. Even our ancestors, with all their might, shattered against those defenses. We must be wise, your grace, or we will lose more than we have already sacrificed. Sir Ryam Redwin's voice, usually a reassuring baritone, now held an edge of iron resolve. The men are raw, your grace, but they have endured the unimaginable horrors of the Neck. They look to us for leadership, for courage. If we hesitate now, their fear will fester, rotting the army from within. But a direct assault, he paused, his gaze drifting over the map, tracing the treacherous, twisting approach to the causeway. We would be slaughtered in the mud, cut down like wheat before the scythe. Prince Aemon, the king's eldest son, his young face already bearing the marks of command, spoke with a quiet intensity. We cannot simply linger here, father. If we remain on the edge of the Neck, we are nothing more than prey for every lurking wolf and unseen Cranogman. We must take the moat, and swiftly. We have the means to overcome stone and mud, the dragons. Prince Balon, ever the more impetuous of the two, his eyes burning with a fierce eagerness, stepped forward. Let me lead the first assault, father, he pleaded, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of his sword. Give me 10,000 men, and Vagar. We will find a breach, we will tear down their walls. King Jaehaerys raised a hand, silencing his eager son with a stern look. We will first probe their defenses, Balon. We will see if Moat Cailin can be broken by traditional means before we unleash the dragons. We do not need to create another cursed Harrenhal in the north. Fire is a weapon of last resort, not a tool for impatience. Lord Rogar Baratheon scowled, his frustration evident. The prince is right about one thing, your grace, we cannot simply sit here and wither. The men are hungry, they are angry, and their patience is wearing thin. If we show fear now, the army will unravel. Lord Eustace Hightower's voice, though soft, held a firm conviction. We must use the land itself as our shield, your grace. Build dikes to divert the swamp waters, raise palisades to protect our flanks, dig trenches to impede their sorties. Force the moat's garrison to waste their strength on futile attacks. Winter will come soon enough, and the Northmen will feel its icy bite as keenly as we do. Lord Tymond Lannister's lips curled into a sly smile, a hint of his characteristic cunning. Perhaps, your grace, we can pursue both paths. Feint a massive assault upon the main gate, drawing their eyes and their strength to the causeway, while a smaller, more agile force slips through the treacherous marsh under the cover of night. Scale the seemingly impassable walls, find a hidden way into their garrisons. Lord Corwin Velaryon nodded slowly, his sea-weathered face thoughtful. My men, your grace, can scout the waterways, those navigable by shallow draft boats. The Cranogmen know every hidden path, every submerged log, but they are not ghosts. Catch one, make him talk, and there are ways to make even the most stubborn Cranogmen yield, and we might find a way inside, a weakness in their seemingly impenetrable defenses. Prince Aemon's hand tightened on his sword hilt, his youthful idealism clashing with the grim pragmatism of the council. We should not rely on treachery alone, father. If we attack, let it be with fire and steel, with the might of our armies. The men need a victory, not more waiting, more creeping through the mud. Sir Ryam Redwin's face remained grim. A night assault might win us the walls, your grace, or lose us all in the dark and the treacherous mud. I would not send men where I would not willingly go myself. But Lord Tymond speaks wisely. While we press our attack openly, another hand, unseen, might indeed turn the key. Prince Balon, his eagerness barely contained, cut in once more. Let me lead that hand, father. Give me the men, the climbers. I will bring you the gate, or die trying. King Jaehaerys's gaze was stern, his affection for his son tempered by the gravity of the situation. You will not risk yourself for pride, Balon. Your life is worth more than a single gate. A tense silence descended upon the tent, broken only by the crackling of the nearby torches and the distant sigh of the wind rustling through the reeds. Lord Eustace Hightower spoke softly, his voice a gentle counterpoint to the prevailing tension. We must not forget the Cranogmen, your grace. They are the true masters of this land, their knowledge of the swamps a weapon more potent than any steel. If we take the moat but lose half our host to their poisoned darts and hidden traps in the swamps, what have we truly won? We must find a way to blunt their knives, to navigate their treacherous domain. Lord Corwin Velaryon said, his sharp eyes thoughtful, we have taken prisoners during our march through the Neck, your grace. Let me speak with them. Some might be turned, their loyalties fractured, their hatred for the North as strong as our own. With their unwilling guidance, we might find paths through the marsh that the defenders believe are unguarded. Lord Tywin Lannister's soft laugh held a hint of cynicism. Or they could lead us into quicksand, your grace. But I would risk 100 men on the chance of seizing the gate, rather than 10,000 on a bloody, frontal assault against those formidable walls. Sir Ryan Redwyn looked directly at the king, his gaze unwavering. We must decide, your grace. The men will not wait forever. Their morale is a fragile thing, easily shattered by inaction. King Jaehaerys glanced at each of his lords in turn, his violet eyes reflecting the flickering torchlight. We will not wait, he declared, his voice firm with renewed resolve. Corwin, gather your best scouts. Find us a path through the marsh, a way to circumvent their defenses. Tymond, speak with the most skilled climbers among our ranks, and do so with utmost discretion. Ryam, ready the main force for a feint at dawn, a show of strength to draw their attention. Rogar, you and Balon will prepare the vanguard, the men eager for battle. Eustace, see to the camp's defenses, we will not be caught unawares by any further swamp-born treachery. The lords nodded, each already turning over the assigned tasks in their minds, the weight of their responsibilities settling upon their shoulders. Prince Balon, despite his father's earlier caution, could not entirely hide his excitement. I will not fail you, father, he vowed, his youthful enthusiasm momentarily eclipsing the grim reality of their situation. Prince Aemon's voice was quieter, more measured, reflecting his more thoughtful nature. I will stand with Ryam at the gate, father. Our presence may lend courage to the men. Lord Tywin Lannister was already whispering instructions to a nearby squire, his sly smile returning as he contemplated the intricacies of infiltration. Lord Eustace Hightower's pale eyes never left the king's face, his concern unwavering. If the moat falls, your grace, the north lies open to us. But if we bleed ourselves dry against its defenses, the realm will not forgive such a costly victory. King Jaehaerys nodded slowly, the weight of their precarious position heavy upon him. We have come too far, sacrificed too much, to fail now. Go, all of you. Let every man know, tomorrow, the dragon's banners will fly over Moat Cailin, or we will leave our bones to rot in the mud of the neck. One by one, the lords filed out of the stifling tent, their voices low, their faces set with grim determination. Only Lord Rogar Baratheon lingered, his massive hand resting heavily on the scarred table. Your grace, he said quietly, his usual bluster replaced by a rare note of concern, the men trust you. I trust you. But these lands, they do not love us. If things turn ill tomorrow. King Jaehaerys met his gaze, his violet eyes holding a steady resolve. Then we stand together, Rogar, as we always have. Lord Rogar nodded, his broad shoulders straightening. I'll see the vanguard ready, your grace. When the last of his council had departed, Jaehaerys stood alone in the flickering torchlight, the silence of the tent amplifying the sounds of the sprawling camp outside. He heard the ragged cough of wounded men, the distant clang of hammers as defenses were hastily erected, the endless, mournful sigh of the marsh wind. For a fleeting moment, he allowed himself to feel the crushing weight of every lost life, every whispered doubt that gnawed at the edges of his resolve. Then, with a deep breath, he turned back to the battered map, his finger, stained with ink in the mud of the neck, tracing the narrow, treacherous line of the causeway leading to the formidable black stones of Moat Cailin. Tomorrow, the realm would know if a king's will, backed by the might of the Iron Throne, could finally break the oldest stronghold in the north, or if the unforgiving neck would swallow yet another southern army whole. 23 comments 0 vote. War 1. 77 AC. Moat Cailin. Third person POV. The first sight of dawn painted the mist-shrouded landscape of the neck in hues of gray and sickly yellow. A nervous energy gripped the southern army encamped before the looming black walls of Moat Cailin. Lord Ryam Redwyn, his face grim, surveyed the assembled ranks, 10,000 men poised at the head of the causeway, their shields gleaming dully in the nascent light. Beside him stood Prince Aemon, his young face set with a determined resolve, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Remember the plan, Lord Ryam's voice boomed across the ranks, each word carrying the weight of command. A feigned assault. Draw their eyes to the gate. Make them believe this is our main thrust. Balon nodded, his gaze fixed on the formidable towers of Moat Cailin. And while they focus on us, he said, his voice tight with anticipation, William's climbers will find their way over the walls. Hidden within the murky depths of the surrounding swamp, a smaller, more agile force moved with stealthy purpose. William, a renowned climber from the west, led a hand-picked company of the South's most skilled ascent specialists. They navigated the treacherous terrain, their movements guided by the reluctant whispers of a captured Cranogman, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hatred. Are you certain this path is clear? William hissed at the scout, his breath misting in the cool morning air. The scout, a wiry man with skin the color of moss and eyes that darted like startled frogs, croaked, "The mud will swallow you whole if you stray. The trees have eyes, they watch. The water, it bites with teeth you cannot see." William tightened his grip on the scout's arm, his knuckles white. "Just tell us if the path leads to the walls. And if there are guards." "Guards always watch," the scout whispered, his gaze flicking nervously towards the looming black stones, as if expecting them to awaken. "But the mist, it hides many things. And the Cranogmen, we know how to move unseen." As William's climbers slipped through the swamp, their movements silent as the falling mist, Lord Ryan gave the signal. With a thunderous roar that shattered the morning stillness, the southern vanguard surged forward, their war cries echoing across the narrow causeway. A torrent of arrows, black feathers tipped with steel, rained down from the castle walls, peppering the advancing ranks like a sudden, deadly storm. "Hold the line," Lord Ryan bellowed, his voice a rallying cry amidst the growing chaos. "Shields up. For the king. Show these Northmen the steel of the south." Men fell almost instantly, their cries of pain swallowed by the din of battle, the clash of steel, the thud of arrows against shields, the guttural roars of dying men. The causeway, narrow and exposed, became a killing ground, a strip of blood-soaked earth leading to the unyielding black stone. Yet, the southern soldiers pressed on, driven by the promise of victory, the ingrained discipline of their training, and the ever-present fear of the king's wrath should they falter. On the castle walls, the northern defenders, clad in the muted grays and greens of their land, held their ground with grim determination. Their faces, hardened by the harsh northern winters, showed no fear. They rained down arrows with deadly accuracy, hurled jagged stones that crunched through armor, and poured steaming, viscous oil that sizzled and burned upon the advancing southerners. The black stones of Moat Cailin seemed to drink the blood of the invaders, its ancient defenses, forged in a time of constant warfare, holding firm against the onslaught. While the main assault raged at the gate, a desperate dance of death and stone unfolded at the base of the walls. William's climbers reached their objective. The black stones were slick with moisture and a treacherous layer of green moss, offering scant purchase for hands and feet. The mist, while providing a veil of concealment, also clung to the stone, making the ascent a perilous endeavor. "Hurry," William urged his men, his voice a low, urgent hiss. "Before they realize we're here. Every moment we delay is another arrow in our backs." The climbers, their movements agile despite the difficult terrain and the weight of their grappling hooks and ropes, began their ascent. Their calloused fingers scrabbled for the slightest holds, their bodies pressed flat against the cold, unforgiving stone, each movement a testament to years of training. Arrows rained down from the battlements above, guided by unseen eyes. Some found their mark with sickening thuds, sending men tumbling back into the murky swamp with muffled splashes and strangled cries. "Damn them," William cursed under his breath as a climber just ahead of him gasped and fell, a northern arrow protruding from his neck like a grotesque flower. "Move faster. We're sitting ducks here." They reached a narrow, jagged ledge halfway up the wall, a precarious perch offering a brief, agonizing respite. Below them, the swamp bubbled and hissed, claiming it's fallen. Above, the sounds of the main assault continued unabated. The clang of steel, the shouts of men, the ominous thud of heavy objects impacting the ground. "Can you see any way over?" William asked a wiry climber who had edged ahead, his movements like a mountain cat. The climber, his face inches from the cold stone, peered through the swirling mist, his brow furrowed in concentration. "There's a sally port, my lord, higher up. Just above that outcropping. But it's guarded. I saw movement. 2 men, I think." "Guarded how?" William pressed, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. 10 men, my lord. With spears. They seem alert." William's lips, usually curved in a sardonic smile, now tightened into a grim line. 10 men or nothing, he declared, his voice low and dangerous. "We take that gate. It's our only chance." As William's remaining climbers, their numbers already dwindling, prepared to assault the sally port, the main assault at the gate began to falter. The narrow causeway was choked with the mangled bodies of the fallen, a gruesome carpet of blood and steel. The relentless barrage from the castle walls, combined with the natural choke point of the approach, had taken a heavy toll. "We can't hold them much longer, Ryan," Prince Balon shouted, his young face grim with exertion and frustration, his usually pristine armor stained with blood and mud. "Their defenses are too strong. We're being butchered out here." Lord Ryan, his own armor bearing several dents and scratches, his breath coming in ragged gasps, surveyed the carnage with a heavy heart. "We have drawn their attention, Prince. William and his climbers should have reached the walls by now. Their sacrifice must not be in vain." But there was no signal from above, no answering cry, no sign that William's desperate gamble had paid off. The feigned assault, meant to be a diversion, had become a bloody stalemate, a testament to the impregnable nature of Moat Cailin. Now, Prince Balon roared, seizing the opportunity amidst the chaos. For the king, to the gate, press the attack. As they reached the gate, they found it still barred, the heavy iron-bound wood holding firm. The northern defenders, though shaken, had rallied with grim determination, their arrows and spears finding their mark amongst the advancing southerners, their defiance echoing from the black walls. "We need to breach this gate," Prince Balon shouted, hacking furiously at the heavy wooden bars with Dark Sister, sparks flying with each desperate blow. Meanwhile, William's climbers reached the sally port. The two northern guards, alerted by the sounds of the main assault, stood ready, their spears pointed menacingly at the narrow opening. "For the king," William roared, his voice echoing in the confined space, leading the desperate charge. The climbers, though weary from their arduous ascent and diminished in number, attacked with the ferocity of men with nothing left to lose. Steel clashed against steel in the narrow confines of the sally port, the sounds echoing eerily against the cold stone. One of William's men, a young boy barely a man grown, fell with a strangled cry, a northern spear piercing his unprotected chest. But the others pressed on, their desperation fueled by the knowledge that the main assault below was faltering, their sacrifice meaningless if they failed here. William himself engaged one of the northern guards, his skilled movements honed by years of scaling treacherous cliffs. With a swift thrust, his blade found its mark, slipping between the guard's ribs, and the Northman fell, his lifeblood staining the ancient black stone. "Open the gate," William shouted to his remaining climbers, his voice hoarse with exertion and the sting of a minor wound. "Quickly, every moment counts." They strained against the heavy bars securing the sally port, their hands slick with sweat and blood, their muscles screaming in protest. Finally, with a loud groan of protesting wood and rusted metal, the sally port swung inward, a dark, narrow opening onto the battlements above. But their triumph was short-lived, a fleeting moment of hope extinguished by the harsh reality of their situation. As they emerged onto the battlements, they were met by a hail of arrows, loosed by the northern defenders who had anticipated such a desperate maneuver. The narrow walkway became a death trap, more climbers falling, their bodies tumbling from the high walls to the ground below with sickening thuds. Below, the southern attack on the main gate had stalled, the initial momentum lost against the stubborn northern defense. "Fall back," Lord Ryam roared, his voice filled with bitter frustration, seeing the futility of continuing the assault against such formidable defenses. "Regroup. We're gaining nothing but casualties." The southern soldiers, their spirits broken by the unyielding defenses and the heavy losses, began a slow, disorganized retreat, leaving behind a bloody trail of fallen comrades, their sacrifices seemingly in vain. Prince Balon, his young face etched with grim frustration, reluctantly followed his Lord Commander's order, his hand still gripping the hilt of Dark Sister, a silent promise of future vengeance. As they retreated, their eyes were drawn to the chaos erupting on the battlements high above. William's small force of climbers was engaged in a desperate, last-ditch struggle against overwhelming numbers of northern defenders, their figures silhouetted against the smoke and the flickering flames. Arrows flew thick as rain, and the sharp clang of steel against steel echoed across the blood-soaked battlefield, a tragic symphony of a failed gambit. Then, a volley of arrows, launched with deadly accuracy, struck William. He staggered, his skilled hands losing their grip on the battlements, his blade clattering against the stone as it fell from his grasp. He clutched at his chest, his eyes, filled with a mixture of pain and defiance, fixed on the retreating southern army far below. With a final, desperate cry that was swallowed by the sounds of battle, he toppled from the battlements, his body plummeting through the air to land on the unforgiving ground with a sickening thud, a stark and brutal testament to the North's unwavering defense. The desperate gamble had failed, and the black walls of Moat Cailin stood defiant against the bloodied dawn. It has been 2 days since they tried to breach Moat Cailin, and the army has lost another 15,000 men. The camp was a somber, mud-soaked testament to failure. Inside the king's tent, gloom hung heavy. Ryam reported no ground gained, only unyielding defenses and plummeting morale. Rogar raged about the Northmen's devilish resilience. Eustace Hightower, pale and drawn, lamented the high cost and the approaching winter. Emmon, his eagerness replaced by grim resolve, faced his father. "We have probed them, father. They cannot be broken by traditional means." Jaehaerys, his face etched with weariness, looked at his exhausted lords. The grim faces and mounting casualties pointed to one truth. The traditional methods had failed. A new, cold fire burned in Jaehaerys's violet eyes. "Summon Prince Balon," he commanded, his voice ringing with renewed authority. "We will prepare the dragon for the final assault tomorrow. Tomorrow it shall be a full frontal assault. If the stone will not break, then it shall burn." A collective sigh of relief and trepidation rippled through the tent. They had seen the cost of conventional warfare. Now, they would see the fury of a dragon. The battle for the neck was not over, it was merely entering its most devastating phase. The black stones of Moat Cailin had held against steel and mud, but now, they would face fire and blood. 7 comments 0 vote. War 2. 77 AC. Moat Cailin. Third person POV. The next day, within the war tent, the air crackled with a mixture of anticipation and dread. King Jaehaerys and his sons, Aemon and Balon, finalized their plan, their faces grim but resolute. They would mount their dragons, unleashing fire upon the unyielding defenses of Moat Cailin. After a tense discussion of tactics, they left the tent, the fate of their army and the north resting on their scaled mounts. As they mounted their dragons, the ground trembling beneath the massive beasts, an unnatural sound reached their ears, a dragon's roar, but not their own. A roar that echoed with a power and resonance that chilled even their experienced blood. Jaehaerys, Aemon, and Balon turned their gazes upwards, their faces etched with stunned disbelief. Against the pale sky, 4 dragons descended with terrifying speed. The largest was a behemoth, its size dwarfing even Vhagar, rivaling the legendary Balerion the Black Dread. The smallest was comparable to Silverwing in size, but its movements were swift and predatory. These were not dragons of the south. These were dragons unknown, their presence a terrifying mystery, their intentions unclear. The battle for Moat Cailin, already a desperate struggle, had taken a turn into the realm of nightmare. The sudden, unexpected roar sent a jolt of pure dread through King Jaehaerys. His gaze, along with Aemon and Balon's, snapped skyward, the initial shock quickly giving way to a desperate need for evasion. With a shouted command, Jaehaerys banked Vermithor sharply to the left, Aemon veering Caraxes to the right, and Balon pulling Vhagar into a steep climb. The colossal forms of the unknown dragons streaked past the space where they had just been, the wind of their passage buffeting the Targaryen mounts. Once they had put some distance between themselves and the terrifying newcomers, Jaehaerys risked another glance. His heart hammered against his ribs. The 4 dragons were now clearly visible against the overcast sky, their scales a kaleidoscope of unfamiliar hues. But it wasn't just their presence that sent a shiver down his spine, it was what he saw on their backs. Riders. 3 of the 4 dragons bore figures astride their necks, cloaked and armored, their identities obscured by the distance and the swirling mist. Their posture was assured, almost casual, even as they moved with breathtaking speed. These were no wild beasts, they were commanded. Then his gaze fell upon the 4th, the largest of them all, a monstrous creature that dwarfed even the mighty Vhagar, truly the size of Balerion the Black Dread. And it was riderless. The sheer power emanating from the colossal beast was palpable, a primeval force unburdened by a master. A cold, hard knot formed in Jaehaerys' stomach. This was a nightmare made real. The North now possessed its own winged beasts, and one of them was a force of nature comparable to the legendary Black Dread. The king's plans, his assumptions about this war, were shattered in that horrifying realization. This was not merely a challenge, it was an existential threat. The terrifying sight of 4 unknown dragons, one colossal and riderless, obliterated all other concerns. The planned assault on Moat Cailin vanished from Jaehaerys' mind, replaced by the primal instinct of self-preservation and the urgent need to understand this new, monstrous threat. Evasion was only a temporary measure, to flee blindly was to invite a strike from behind. Hold formation. Jaehaerys roared, pulling Vermithor into a wide, arcing turn. We test their strength. Aemon, Balon, keep their flanks. Do not break formation. Aemon, his face pale but determined, nodded grimly as Caraxes wheeled beside Vermithor. Balon, ever eager for a fight, let out a defiant cry, urging Vhagar forward, though his initial bravado was now laced with a healthy dose of awe at the sheer size of the largest unknown beast. The northern dragons, sensing the Targaryens' shift from evasion to confrontation, responded in kind. The 3 ridden dragons, smaller than Vhagar but swift and agile, spread out, forming a loose crescent. The colossal, riderless dragon, however, moved with an unsettling, deliberate majesty, positioning itself directly in front of the Targaryen trio, its immense shadow falling over them like a pall. They mean to engage, Aemon shouted, his voice barely audible over the growing roar of dragon wings. The first volley of fire came from the ridden dragons. A stream of blue flame erupted from the largest of the 3, streaking towards Vermithor. Jaehaerys reacted instantly, pulling Vermithor into a barrel roll, the fiery jet sizzling harmlessly past his wing. At the same moment, 2 bolts of white and gray flame shot towards Caraxes and Vhagar. Caraxes banked sharply, the white fire grazing his tail, while Vhagar, with a powerful beat of her wings, soared above the burning streak. Their fire is cold, Balon cried, his face grim. And fast. Jaehaerys knew this was no mere skirmish. This was a test of raw power, a deadly dance in the sky. He urged Vermithor forward, aiming a blast of his golden flame at the colossal, riderless dragon. The king understood the psychological impact of such a beast. If it could be shaken, even slightly, it might give them an edge. Vermithor's flame, a hot, brilliant gout, struck the massive dragon on its shoulder. The scales, dark and ancient-looking, shimmered, absorbing the impact. The beast barely flinched, letting out a low, guttural rumble that vibrated through the air, more a sound of annoyance than pain. The riderless leviathan retaliated with a terrifying display of power. Its jaws unhinged, and a torrent of dark blue flame, thick and noxious, erupted forth. It was unlike any dragonfire Jaehaerys had ever seen, a crushing, suffocating darkness that seemed to devour the light itself. The flame enveloped the space between Vermithor and Caraxes, forcing them to split wide, narrowly avoiding the deadly inferno. The cold was immense, even from a distance, chilling the air and making Vermithor whine in discomfort. Gods above, what was that? Aemon gasped, his face pale. It's colder than other flames. Balon, always the most aggressive, roared defiance and unleashed Vogger's mighty breath, a wave of orange-yellow fire, directly at one of the ridden northern dragons. The smaller northern dragon, its scales a mottled gray, twisted in the air with surprising agility, barely evading the blast. Its rider, a cloaked figure, leaned low, seemingly whispering commands. The engagement quickly devolved into a swirling aerial ballet of fire and evasion. The three Targaryen dragons, though powerful, found themselves outmaneuvered by the agile ridden dragons, who darted and weaved, always forcing the Targaryens to react. Their coordinated movements suggested years of practice, a terrifying synergy between dragon and rider. One northern dragon, its scales a pale green, roared and spewed a blinding white flame, a searing light that temporarily disoriented Caraxes. Aemon cried out, momentarily losing control as Caraxes lurched, forcing Jaehaerys to swoop Vermithor close, drawing the green dragon's attention away with a warning roar. All the while, the colossal, riderless dragon maintained its imposing presence. It did not engage in the frantic dogfighting of the others. Instead, it moved with deliberate, powerful strokes, its focus entirely on the Targaryen kings. It was a looming threat, a silent, unblinking force of nature that struck fear into the hearts of even the most hardened dragon riders. Balon, seeing its relentless advance, made a desperate gamble. He dove Vhagar, aiming her colossal weight directly at the riderless dragon, hoping to force a physical confrontation, to use Vhagar's raw strength where fire seemed ineffective. Balon, no, Jaehaerys bellowed, understanding the immense risk. Vhagar crashed into the larger dragon's side with a sickening thud that reverberated through the sky. Vhagar roared, trying to grapple, to tear at the ancient scales. But the colossal dragon merely let out another deep, vibrating rumble. It twisted, not violently, but with an immense, slow power, shrugging Vhagar off as if she were a bothersome fly. Vhagar was thrown clear, spinning uncontrollably for a moment, her own scales scraped and scarred from the impact, her rider Balon clinging precariously to her neck. The riderless dragon, seemingly unperturbed, then unleashed another blast of its dark blue flame, this time a wider, sweeping arc, forcing all three Targaryen dragons to scatter wildly. The very air around the blue flame felt heavy, oppressive, stealing heat and light. The battle continued, a relentless assault on the Targaryen dragons. The ridden northern dragons, despite their smaller size, proved incredibly resilient. They moved with a tactical precision that spoke volumes of their riders' skill. They'd fire, then dart away, drawing the Targaryens into unfavorable positions, always herding them closer to the massive, unridden beast. Caraxes, having recovered from the white flame, roared in frustration. Aemon tried to pin one of the northern dragons, a swift, serpentine creature, against the clouds, but the beast twisted, its rider guiding it through impossibly tight turns, then blasted Caraxes with a stream of hot, purple fire that sent him screeching. "They're faster, father," Aemon called out, struggling to keep Caraxes steady. "And they're working together." Jaehaerys, his jaw tight, knew his son spoke the truth. Vermithor was strong, Caraxes agile, and Vhagar massive, but these northern dragons, coupled with their skilled riders, were a cohesive, terrifying unit. The sheer power of the riderless dragon was also draining them. Every evasion, every defensive maneuver, demanded immense effort from the Targaryen beasts. Another of the ridden dragons, a sleek, dark gray beast, darted underneath Vhagar, then shot upwards, raking her belly with claws before she could react. Vhagar roared in pain and fury, blasting fire downwards, but the grey dragon was already gone, disappearing into the mist. The unthinkable reality. The grim realization settled over Jaehaerys like a shroud. This wasn't merely a test of strength, it was a revelation. The North, isolated for so long, had not just survived, it had evolved. These dragons, these riders, represented a terrifying new power, a challenge to the Targaryen supremacy that had endured doom. The riderless behemoth, in particular, was an enigma, a raw, untamed force that defied all understanding. The battle raged for what felt like an eternity, a dizzying, dangerous dance in the sky above the unyielding Moat Cailin. Fire streaked, claws raked, and the air was thick with the scent of ozone and singed scales. But the Targaryen dragons, for all their might, could not gain an advantage. The northern dragons, through their coordinated attacks and superior maneuverability, kept them on the defensive. The riderless Balerion-sized beast, meanwhile, continued its silent, crushing pressure, every black flame a warning of the catastrophic power it wielded. Finally, Jaehaerys saw a fleeting opportunity. The ridden dragons had pressed too close, momentarily separating themselves from their larger companion. He barked a command to his sons. Break off. To the east. We pull back. It was not a retreat born of fear, but of grim necessity. They had tested the waters, and found them to be a raging, dragon-filled ocean. Their assumption of aerial dominance had been shattered. With a final, desperate burst of speed, Vermithor, Caraxes, and Vhagar broke formation, streaking towards the eastern horizon, leaving the 4 northern dragons in command of the skies above Moat Cailin. The roars of the victorious northern dragons echoed behind them, a chilling declaration of their unexpected power. Jaehaerys knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that the war for the north had just taken a terrifying turn. The dragons were not merely a threat, they were the new masters of this conflict, and the Targaryens were no longer alone in the sky. The implications were catastrophic. The roar from above abruptly silenced the battlefield. Southern soldiers froze, northern defenders lowered their weapons. Every eye, from the mud-caked footman to the highest watchman, snapped skyward. A collective gasp, terrified silence, fell over the entire battlefield. The very air vibrated as 4 colossal, unknown dragons joined the familiar Targaryen beasts in a desperate aerial dance. Streams of alien fire, black as night or blinding white, seared the air. Whispers of, more dragons. From where? Rippled through the southern ranks. The sight of a Balerion-sized beast, riderless and unleashing dark blue flame, sent shivers down spines. This wasn't just a battle for a castle, it was a terrifying shift in the world's understanding. On Moat Cailin's walls, northern defenders, initially stunned, murmured with awe and defiance. The unknown dragons felt like a powerful blessing. The ground battle paused. No one moved to fight, unwilling to disturb the titanic struggle overhead. Soldiers were mere spectators to a clash of gods, their own war rendered insignificant. The fate of Moat Cailin, and perhaps the realm, would now be decided by fire and scale in the mist-shrouded skies. The war tent fell silent, thick with the weight of the dragon's aerial clash. King Jaehaerys, weary, slumped onto a stool, while Aemon stood rigid and Balon paced with raw frustration. 4 of them, Balon muttered, his gaze fixed on the tent flap. One was monstrous, like a shadow. It barely felt Vhagar. Their fire was different, too, Aemon added. The dark blue flame, chilling. The white light, blinding. These aren't beasts we've faced. Jaehaerys rubbed his temples. No. And 3 were ridden. By whom? The north holds no dragon seeds we know of. He looked at Lord Rhogar Baratheon. Any new lords, unusual companions? Rhogar shook his head. Nothing, your grace. The scouts speak of no such beasts. And the moat's garrison seemed as stunned as our own men. They are not their dragons. Then whose are they? Eustace Hightower murmured nervously. Wild dragons. But a riderless beast the size of Balerion, acting in concert with ridden ones. It defies all sense. Wild dragons don't act in concert, Aemon countered. They fought with precision, forcing us into positions where the larger beast could strike. The implication hung heavy. Someone in the north, or allied with them, now wielded dragons, powerful, skilled ones, including a beast rivaling Balerion. This changes everything, Lord Ryam Redwyn finally said, his voice a low growl. Our aerial superiority is gone. It's challenged. Challenged. Balon scoffed. We were defensive. This isn't a challenge, it's a revelation of power. Jaehaerys stood, his gaze hardening. Indeed. A game changer. Moat Cailin, the Cranogman, these were obstacles. These dragons are a direct threat to our house, to our very claim. He picked up a splintered token. We cannot fight a prolonged siege against an enemy that can unleash such devastation from the skies. He turned to his sons, his voice firm. Aemon, Balon, your experience today is invaluable. We saw their strength. We also learned we are not alone in the skies. He then addressed a waiting runner. Send a rider. The fastest we have. To Red Keep. Jaehaerys' eyes hardened, thinking of Alysanne. This was beyond normal warfare. Tell the queen, Jaehaerys commanded, his voice ringing with renewed authority, that the north holds unexpected fangs. Tell her to bring Alyssa with her. And tell her to bring their dragons. Aemon's eyes widened, understanding the depth of his father's concern. To summon Alysanne and Silverwing meant dire straits. The runner departed, leaving the lords to exchange uneasy glances. The king had called for the queen. The stakes of this war had just been raised to an unimaginable height. 11 comments 0 vote. War 3. 77 AC. Moat Cailin. Third person POV. 7 days had passed since the urgent message had been dispatched to Dragonstone, each one a grinding eternity spent before Moat Cailin's unyielding walls. The continuous skirmishes with the Cranogmen in the swamp, the relentless chill of the neck, and the constant psychological burden of the unknown dragons weighing on their minds had taken a heavy toll on the southern army. Then, just this morning, a new shadow had fallen across the battlefield, though this one brought a desperate glimmer of hope. The arrival of Queen Alysanne and Princess Alyssa had been a spectacle of awe and relief. Silverwing, Alysanne's graceful silver she-dragon, circled above the camp, her cries a familiar, comforting sound to the weary Targaryens. Following her, a streak of scarlet lightning, was Meleys, Alyssa's vibrant red dragon, her powerful wings beating the air with fierce energy. Their presence, a stark contrast to the grim desolation of the camp, injected a much-needed surge of morale into the beleaguered southern ranks. Soldiers who had been on the verge of despair whispered excitedly, pointing to the sky, a reminder that the Targaryens still commanded the greatest power in Westeros. Now, in the war tent, the air felt charged with a different kind of tension. King Jaehaerys stood at the head of the table, his face still etched with the strain of the past days, but with a renewed fire in his eyes. Beside him stood Queen Alysanne, regal even amidst the rough canvas, her gaze sharp and assessing. Princess Alyssa, a striking figure in her riding leathers, her hand never far from the hilt of her dagger, stood beside her mother, her eyes burning with an eagerness for battle that rivaled Baelin's. My queen, Alyssa, Jaehaerys began, his voice resonating with gratitude and the weight of the moment, your arrival is a beacon in this darkness. We have faced an enemy unlike any we have known. He gestured to the grim faces of Ryam, Rogar, Eustace, Aemon, and Balon. They have seen it, felt it. The dragons we encountered, they are a new force. Queen Alysanne's expression was grave. We saw them, Jaehaerys. 4 beasts, truly immense. And the largest, without a rider. It sent a chill through me even from a distance. Her gaze settled on her sons. Tell us everything. From the beginning. Aemon recounted the aerial skirmish with somber detail, describing the terrifying speed and coordination of the ridden dragons, the unnerving coldness of the black flame from the colossal beast, and the blinding white fire from another. They were skilled, mother, he concluded, his voice tight. They moved as a unit, hurting us, testing us. They were not wild. Balon, ever impatient, interjected, Vhagar tried to grapple with the riderless one, mother. It shrugged her off like a bothersome fly. And its flame, it felt like death itself. Alyssa, who had listened intently, now spoke, her voice surprisingly calm despite the gravity of the situation. And the riders, could you discern anything about them? Lord Ryam Redwyn stepped forward. No, princess, their identities obscured. They flew with a confidence that spoke of mastery, not just familiarity. We have no intel, no reports of any dragon riders in the north, save for your grace's own house. Eustace Hightower wrung his hands. This is unprecedented. Dragons, outside of your bloodline, it is an omen, your grace. A dark one. Alysanne, however, cut him off with a firm hand gesture. Omens can be defied, Lord Hightower. Jaehaerys, what is our immediate course of action? We cannot allow these new dragons to hold dominion over our skies. Jaehaerys's voice, now imbued with a chilling calm, cut through the tent. His eyes, fixed on his queen and daughters, held a fierce, calculated glint. Precisely, my love. We've tested Moat Cailin by land, and it's resisted. We've now faced the aerial threat. We won't repeat the errors of the past 2 days. He turned to Alysanne and Alyssa, his resolve burning brighter than ever. Today, we fly, all of us. Vermithor, Caraxes, Vhagar, Silverwing, Meleys. We'll engage these new dragons, whatever their origin. We'll test their limits, and they will know the true power of House Targaryen. Then, his gaze flickered to Ser Ryam Redwyn, his expression hardening further. And while we are engaging them in the skies, Ser Ryam, the king continued, his voice dropping to a low, unwavering command, you are to make a full frontal assault on the walls of Moat Cailin. Do not give them a gap. Press them on every inch of the causeway. Make sure of that. We will draw their dragons, and you will draw their men. Their attention will be split, and their courage will break. The final words in the war tent were sharp, laced with grim determination. Jaehaerys's command for a full frontal assault on Moat Cailin, while the dragons clashed above, was a desperate gamble. But the king's will was absolute. Minutes later, the royal family emerged. The damp, cold air of the neck stung their faces, but their gaze was fixed on their waiting mounts. Vermithor, Caraxes, Vhagar, Silverwing, and Meleys, the heart of Targaryen power, ascended into the grey sky, leaving Esser Ryam Redwyn's vanguard below to prepare for their own suicidal charge. As they broke through the low-hanging mists, 4 distinct shapes coalesced above Moat Cailin. The unknown dragons. Their scales glinted, pristine white, pale green, mottled grey, and a shimmering, crystalline blue. There they are. Baelin's voice crackled, a mix of awe and furious anticipation. Jaehaerys studied their opponents. The largest, still riderless, was a terrifying, autonomous force. On the backs of the others, he could now discern the figures of their riders. The enemy dragons accelerated to meet them. Hold formation. Jaehaerys roared. Stay tight. We strike as one. The 5 Targaryen dragons surged forward, ready to attack the ice dragons, whatever chilling power these creatures wielded. The battle began with a terrifying roar that echoed across the neck. 5 Targaryen dragons met the 4 northern beasts in a maelstrom of ice and fire. The air crackled with raw power. Jaehaerys, on Vermithor, unleashed golden flame towards the dark grey northern dragon. Alysanne, on Silverwing, blasted silver fire at the pale green dragon. Alyssa, on Meleys, became a scarlet blur, darting towards the blue dragon. Baelon, with typical bravado, immediately targeted the massive, riderless black dragon. The colossal, riderless white dragon became the focal point. Vhagar, driven by Baelin's commands, slammed into the Leviathan, her claws scraping against unyielding, ice-like scales. The white dragon didn't cry out, but emitted a deep, vibrating rumble as it slowly, powerfully shrugged Vhagar off, sending the mighty bronze-green dragon spinning, Baelon clinging desperately. Gods, it's like hitting a mountain of iron. Baelon screamed, regaining control of Vhagar, whose flanks bled from deep gouges. Jaehaerys urged Vermithor forward, blasting golden flame into the white dragon's face. The beast flinched, pulling its head back with a guttural growl. Then, it retaliated. A monstrous torrent of chilling dark blue flame erupted, a consuming darkness that stole warmth and left bone-chilling cold. The blast forced Vermithor and Vhagar into desperate, impossible evasions. The flame's edge licked Vermithor's tail, turning scales a sickly, frosted gray. It's not just fire, father, it's ice. Baelon yelled, Vhagar shivering despite the air's warmth. The horrifying truth solidified. These were ice dragons, creatures of myth. The other 3 northern dragons engaged Caraxes, Silverwing, and Meleys in a brutal aerial ballet. These ridden dragons, though smaller, were incredibly agile, and their riders demonstrated frightening skill. The pale green dragon met Silverwing head-on. Alysanne's silver fire clashed with the green dragon's brilliant white flame, dissolving into a shimmering cloud of steam and light. They match Silverwing's breath. Alysanne exclaimed in alarm. This is not merely brute strength, they are well trained. Alyssa, on Meleys, found herself in a furious dogfight with the blue dragon. Meleys used all her renowned speed to dodge rapid, precise bursts of azure flame. The blue dragon moved like lightning, its long, slender body twisting with unnerving fluidity, always just out of reach. Alyssa, furious, returned fire, but the elusive beast and its shadowy rider evaded every blast. It's too fast, Alyssa cried, narrowly avoiding a claw rake. It's playing with me. Caraxes was locked in a brutal exchange with the dark grey dragon. The grey beast was powerfully built, guided by a grim-faced, broad-shouldered rider. Their flames, Caraxes' golden and the grey dragon's grey, clashed repeatedly. Caraxes was faster, but the grey dragon was surprisingly strong, its jaws snapping dangerously close to his neck. Damn them, Aemon roared, urging Caraxes into a tight spiral, narrowly avoiding a grey blast that singed his dragon's wing. They're fighting with purpose. As the engagement raged, a chilling shift occurred. The dark grey dragon, relentless and powerful, seemed to focus its entire might on Caraxes. Its rider, a formidable presence, pushed the beast to its absolute limits. The grey dragon launched a relentless barrage of searing grey flame, forcing Caraxes to expend more and more energy in desperate evasions. Then, with a sudden, devastating burst of speed, the grey dragon slammed into Caraxes from above. The impact was bone-jarring. Caraxes screeched, his serpentine body buckling. The grey dragon, using its weight and the momentum of the blow, began to drive Caraxes downwards, relentlessly pushing him through the air, its powerful claws raking at his back. Aemon, struggling desperately, felt his dragon's strength draining away. Caraxes! Aemon bellowed, gripping his saddle, but it was too late. The Grey Dragon, with a final, brutal push, forced Caraxes into an uncontrolled descent. The ground rushed up. With a sickening thud, Caraxes, along with Prince Aemon, slammed into the muddy earth of the neck, a cloud of dirt and mist erupting around them. Caraxes roared in pain, struggling to rise, but the Grey Dragon landed heavily on his back, pinning him down, its jaws dangerously close to Aemon. Simultaneously, the Blue Dragon, which had been toying with Melis, abruptly changed tactics. Its playful evasion morphed into aggressive pursuit. It unleashed a continuous stream of freezing azure flame, chilling Melis to the bone. The Red Queen, renowned for her speed, found herself sluggish, her vibrant scales frosting over. The Blue Dragon, then, with terrifying speed, whipped its long, slender tail, striking Melis's wing with devastating force. Melis shrieked, her powerful wing buckling at an unnatural angle. The Blue Dragon, seizing the moment, dove, grappling onto Melis's back and driving her downwards. Alyssa, shocked and struggling, felt the inevitable pull. With a loud, pained roar, Melis crashed into the mud, not far from Caraxes, her broken wing twisted beneath her. The Blue Dragon landed lightly beside her, its neck coiling, its icy gaze fixed on Alyssa as she scrambled free, her heart pounding. 2 Targaryen dragons, and 2 of the king's children, were now pinned to the ground, defeated. The sky battle had swung violently. The tide had turned, and the true, devastating power of the ice dragons had been chillingly revealed. While the battle of ice and fire raged above, a grim, brutal drama unfolded below. Esser Ryam Redwyn, a pillar of iron amidst the swirling chaos, led the southern army in their desperate, full-frontal assault on Moat Cailin. His voice, hoarse but unwavering, cut through the din of the distant dragon battle, rallying his men. Forward! For the king! For the realm! Ryam bellowed, his sword gleaming dully in the mist. He rode at the head of the charge, a wave of human bodies surging behind him, a sea of steel and desperate courage. The ground shuddered beneath their thunderous advance. Thousands of men, their armor clanking, their boots churning the thick mud of the causeway, became a living battering ram aimed at Moat Cailin's unyielding black walls. Arrows from the towers rained down, and boiling oil hissed, but the men pressed on, their eyes fixed on the distant stone, their lives wagered on the hope that the dragons above would provide the decisive distraction. They were within a stone's throw of the walls, the shouts of the northern defenders growing clearer, the stench of burning pitch thick in the air. Then, the ground began to tremble, not with their own charge, but with a deeper, more resonant vibration. A sound like thunder, yet sharper, colder, echoed across the neck. It wasn't from the sky, but seemed to emanate from the very earth itself. The southern soldiers, already on edge from the distant dragon roars, exchanged bewildered glances. What new horror was this? Before they could fully comprehend, a blinding flash erupted on their southern flank, not at the walls of Moat Cailin, but far behind their main assaulting force, closer to their camp. It was followed by a deafening, concussive blast that ripped through the air. A shockwave, visible as a ripple through the mist, slammed into the advancing ranks. Soldiers near the impact zone were lifted off their feet like rag dolls, their bodies twisted grotesquely, flung outwards with incredible force. A chorus of screams, sharp and disbelieving, tore through the charge. Horses shrieked, rearing in terror, throwing their riders into the churned mud. The ground itself seemed to heave, cracking beneath their feet. The momentum of the charge instantly shattered. Men stumbled, fell, and scrambled, their formation dissolving into chaos. Those further from the blast were thrown off balance, disoriented, their ears ringing. They looked back, their faces pale with terror, to see a swirling cloud of dust and debris rising from where their supply lines and camp lay, a gaping, smoking crater where solid ground had been moments before. Esser Ryam, thrown from his horse by the concussive force, landed hard in the mud, his armor ringing. He pushed himself up, spitting out grime, his gaze snapping towards the plume of smoke. What in the 7 hells? He gasped, his voice lost amidst the rising screams and cries of panic. The northern defenders on the walls, who had been bracing for impact, paused their relentless barrage, their own faces showing momentary confusion before a triumphant roar erupted from their ranks. This was no act of their own making, yet it had shattered the southern charge with devastating efficiency. The assault on Moat Cailin had been utterly broken, not by the walls themselves, but by a catastrophic blow from within their own lines, delivered by an unseen, terrifying force. The ground assault, once a desperate gamble, had become a rout, a bloody disaster amplified by a mysterious and devastating explosion. The initial thunderous blast was not an isolated incident. For the next 15 agonizing minutes, the very earth beneath the southern army's feet seemed to convulse. More explosions ripped through their rear and flanks, not with the fire and smoke of wildfire, but with a cold, concussive force that threw men and horses into the air. Each blast was accompanied by that strange, almost supernatural thunder, and a plume of dust and debris that suggested solid ground had simply ceased to be. Panic, raw and unreasoning, seized the southern ranks. Their formations, already strained by the initial charge, shattered completely, transforming an organized assault into a terrified, struggling mass. The initial, deafening blast was not an isolated incident. For a horrifying 15 minutes, the southern flank of the besieging army, closest to their camp and supply lines, was racked by a series of continuous, thunderous explosions. Each concussive wave sent more men and horses flying, tearing gaping holes in the ranks, igniting supply wagons, and turning sections of the swampy ground into smoking, churning craters. Panic, raw and unbridled, seized the southern soldiers. Their discipline, already frayed by days of fruitless assault and the terrifying dragon fight overhead, shattered completely. The causeway, meant for attack, became a bottleneck of terrified, screaming men trying to flee. As the last echoes of the explosions faded, leaving behind only the acrid stench of sulfur and burning timber, a new horror emerged. With a groan of ancient wood and rusted iron, the immense main gates of Moat Cailin, which had withstood 2 days of relentless assault, swung open. From the darkened maw of the fortress poured forth 40,000 northern soldiers, a disciplined, unyielding tide of gray and green. Their war cries, deep and guttural, resonated with a savage joy as they surged onto the causeway, their ranks perfectly formed amidst the disarray of the collapsing southern army. Leading them was a figure of legend and terror, King Theon Stark, his imposing form unmistakable even from a distance. In his hands, he wielded 2 magnificent blades, twin swords that seemed to drink the meager light of the morning, Jon and Theo. Beside him, moving with silent, predatory grace, was a massive direwolf, its fur the color of snow, its eyes piercing blue. And behind this terrifying vanguard, not 1 or 2, but up to 30 direwolves, their powerful forms low to the ground, their eyes gleaming with predatory hunger, streamed from the gate, a living, snarling wave of destruction. The northern army, seizing the chaos born of the thunderous blasts, struck with surgical precision. They hit the already breaking southern formations like a hammer, their disciplined lines cutting swaths through the bewildered and terrified southerners. The direwolves, more phantom than beast, tore through the ranks, their fangs ripping flesh, their snarls adding to the symphony of terror. They moved with an intelligence and ferocity that seemed beyond mere animals, targeting vulnerable flanks, scattering small groups, and adding to the utter pandemonium. The battle raged for a brutal, hour-long eternity. King Theon Stark was a whirlwind of death, his twin blades a silver blur. He moved with a speed and ferocity that defied belief, cutting down man after man. Legends would later speak of his prowess. In that single hour, King Theon Stark alone accounted for up to 100 southern soldiers, his swords never tiring, his resolve unbreakable. Sir Ryam Redwyn, fighting with a grim determination, found himself swallowed by the tide of northern steel and direwolf fangs. He battled valiantly, his lightbringer striking down numerous foes, but the sheer weight of numbers and the disciplined ferocity of the northern charge overwhelmed him. He was eventually disarmed and dragged down by a dozen Northmen, his face a mask of fury and defeat. Lord Rogar Baratheon, trapped with his vanguard on the causeway, fought like the bull he was, his great warhammer crushing northern skulls. But the relentless pressure from King Theon's vanguard and the savagery of the direwolves eventually brought him to his knees. He was seized, battered and bruised, and taken captive. Lord Eustace Hightower, frail and scholarly, but possessing an unexpected courage, found himself surrounded near the rear of the collapsing southern line. He drew his sword, trying to defend himself, but he was no warrior. A swift, brutal blow from a northern axe ended his life, and his body slumped into the churned mud, unmourned amidst the greater catastrophe. As the hour-long massacre concluded, the causeway was a charnel house, thick with southern dead. Moat Cailin now stood not as a barrier, but as the gaping maw of a trap. The North had not merely held, it had counter-attacked with an unprecedented, devastating force. The Southern army, shattered and routed, was in full, panicked flight, leaving behind a horrifying trail of bodies and the chilling reality of their utter defeat. The roar of the victor, King Theon Stark, echoed over the desolate landscape. A new, terrible king had announced himself to the world.